The story kicks off by introducing a sweet cohabitation romantic comedy centered around a senior girlfriend who absolutely loves drinking, with everything starting the moment the magic age of 20 is reached. Takashi admits total defeat right out of the gate, noting that no matter the situation, he can never manage to win against his older girlfriend. Polishing off her drink, she casually calls out his name to get his attention. She brings up the fact that he has finally hit the major milestone of turning 20 today. Dropping an absolute bombshell, she boldly suggests that they should take the plunge and start living together. Takashi is completely caught off guard by her sudden alcohol-fueled boldness. He frantically wonders if she is actually being serious or just messing with him, resigning himself to the fact that he is once again being totally toyed with. Panicking at the rapid escalation, Takashi begs her to wait and desperately suggests they switch their drinks from alcohol over to juice. The young college student attempts to defuse the situation by offering up her absolute favorite juice instead of booze. Reflecting on their nearly 1-year anniversary of dating, Takashi tries to reason that they are still basically just kids. Kureha completely ignores this logic and demands to know whether living together or avoiding alcohol is more important to him. She fiercely reminds him that she is already 21 and he just hit 20 today, shutting down his excuses by loudly declaring that they are officially both full-fledged adults. Kureha-senpai is absolutely thrilled that all their problems are solved, immediately proposing that they move in together. Her junior can only wonder if she is actually 21, pointing out that her line of thinking is still incredibly childish. The realization hits him hard that this cohabitation proposal is far from her usual teasing. When he tries to blame her sudden boldness on the alcohol, she gets defensive, demanding to know if he is accusing her of just being drunk and reckless. The biggest hurdle in his mind is that they have not even had a kiss yet, making the jump to domestic life feel way too fast. When he questions if her parents would ever approve of such a setup, she casually dismisses his worries, claiming she already warned them about moving in with her boyfriend once he hits 20, leaving him to wonder how her family can be so ridiculously laid back, while he frantically tries to figure out how to handle his heavily intoxicated senior. Her playful energy suddenly deflates into vulnerability as she quietly asks if he has grown to hate her because of her behavior. The sudden shift from chaotic to heartbreakingly earnest completely catches him off guard, leaving him flustered and struggling for words. He quickly reassures her by admitting that he would never tolerate or play along with her endless teasing in the first place if he actually disliked her. Her bright, cheerful demeanor instantly returns as she celebrates his honest confession, fully satisfied that he is indeed the reliable guy she believed him to be, leaving him to ponder the true nature of his chaotic senior. Even though she consistently overindulges and acts incredibly needy and pampered around her favorite junior, he knows she is normally a highly guarded professional who never shows this vulnerable side to anyone else. Yet behind closed doors, she constantly bombards his phone with desperate, lonely texts begging to see him, proving just how rapidly her moods swing from one extreme to another when they are apart. Despite all the chaotic whiplash and her demanding nature, he looks at her and realizes that he deeply treasures every single side of his unpredictable senior. However, affection aside, he remains firm on his stance, insisting that they absolutely must verify everything with her family first before any talks of living together can actually begin. Just like that, she calls her mom to follow up on their previous conversation about moving in together, asking if she has a minute to talk. His jaw drops as he realizes she wasn't bluffing about discussing this with her parents, and he is instantly sent into a full-blown panic when she hands over the phone, warning him that her mom has a few parting words specifically for him. Sweating bullets, he introduces himself as Takashi Suzuki and awkwardly explains that he has been dating her daughter for about 2 years now. Instead of getting grilled, he is completely stunned when her mother cheerfully gives her blessing and asks him to take good care of her. Before he can even process the incredibly easy approval, the line suddenly goes completely dead, leaving them standing there in absolute silence. The sheer speed and abruptness of the conversation leave both of them completely frozen in place, trying to comprehend what just transpired. With her mother's instant blessing secured, she happily declares that their cohabitation starts the very next day. He immediately loses his mind at her absurd leaps in logic, shouting that there is absolutely no way this makes sense, and that moving in together tomorrow is way too fast. She pouts and delivers a devastatingly honest counterattack, admitting that she is rushing things simply because she wants to be with him more. The sheer adorable sincerity of her confession hits him like a truck, completely knocking the wind out of his arguments. She immediately teases him about how cute he looks when he blushes, while he mutters that it is only because she was sulking in the first place. She doubles down on her affection, asserting with absolute sincerity that she is completely serious about everything she just said. Gazing directly at him with an intensely earnest expression, she softly asks if he actually does not want to live with her. She locks eyes with him, letting her silent, hopeful gaze do all the talking as she awaits his ultimate decision. He can only gulp in pure nervousness, completely trapped by her overwhelming charm and unable to muster a single coherent reply. He mentally screams in defeat, fully admitting that he is absolutely powerless whenever she looks at him with those pleading, hopeful eyes. With a heavy sigh and a frustrated click of his tongue, he finally prepares to drop his defenses and lay his true, unfiltered feelings right on the line. Blushing furiously, he confesses that it is not a matter of him not wanting to live together with her, but rather that the suddenness of the whole proposal has simply left him incredibly overwhelmed and confused. He quietly admits that despite knowing it is still way too early with jobs and graduation still on the horizon, he cannot help but constantly fantasize about spending every day by her side, though he still deeply wonders just how serious she actually is about this entire plan. She softens, explaining that she actually thought about this move very carefully, though she admits in hindsight that she probably should have discussed it with him first. He sighs, replying that he really just wanted some advance notice to prepare himself mentally, while secretly harboring another major concern. When he hesitantly points out that he still has a ton of personal belongings and stuff to organize before any move can happen, she immediately chirps up, offering to help him clean and pack everything up. He desperately backtracks, insisting that he absolutely does not want her help, which only makes her highly curious as to why he is being so secretive. As she suddenly seems to put two and two together, he internally begs her not to figure out the real embarrassing reason behind his panic. She cheerfully assures him that everything is completely fine, and that she won't be even slightly disgusted no matter how incredibly weird his secret book collection might be, just as she triumphantly uncovers his hidden stash with a loud thud. She begins sorting through his magazines one by one, casually reviewing his highly specific tastes from special bust features to dark-skinned girls, and ultimately deciding that his preferences are actually perfectly acceptable. While he sits there completely dying of embarrassment over the fact that she found the stash he spent so much effort carefully hiding, she casually concludes that her search is complete, and they are now fully ready to move forward. She leans in with a smug, teasing grin, calling his name and asking if he really wanted to do naughty things with her that badly. He completely panics at her bold question, sputtering in disbelief. She casually points out his specific magazine interests, teasingly asking if those aren't the exact areas his eyes are always wandering to, which only makes him shout back in total embarrassment, demanding to know what she is even talking about. Internally, he cannot deny that his eyes are naturally drawn to her chest and thighs, but he insists to himself that it is a completely separate issue. She completely corners him, asking if that is why he used those magazines to imagine it was her, while comforting himself, prompting him to instantly shut down and refuse to comment. She throws out an incredibly tempting offer, suggesting that if he answers her honestly, she might actually do the things shown in his magazines for him someday. Hearing this, he immediately and blankly admits that he did, only to breathe a sigh of relief when he realizes she isn't angry with him. Her sweet demeanor vanishes in an instant as she points directly toward the kitchen, casually instructing him to go burn his beloved books on the stove. He can barely believe his ears, but she reiterates her demand with a terrifyingly cheerful smile, ordering him to immediately destroy every single book in his stash that does not look like her. Left with absolutely no choice, his collection is tragically cut in half as a forced sacrifice to appease her jealousy. Having successfully purged his stash, she instantly shifts back to her bubbly self, clapping her hands and wishing him a happy birthday once again. He can only hold his bag of ruined treasures in a daze, thanking her politely while secretly wondering if this entire ordeal is his divine punishment for settling for magazines when he has an actual girlfriend like her right in front of him. Sighing, he reflects on the fact that she has always managed to cleverly dodge any actual intimacy up until this point making him wonder if she simply enjoys teasing him and driving him crazy. He wishes he had the courage to just confront her about it directly, but his thoughts are cut short when she holds out a fresh can warmly inviting him to join her in having a drink to celebrate. She reassures him that she bought a mild drink perfect for beginners, prompting him to nervously ask her to go easy on him. Realizing he has no other choice but to brace himself and get hyped with some liquid courage, he accepts the glass, as she enthusiastically declares that they are starting off with a carbonate sour. She pours the beverage, reassuring him that it is sweet and low in alcohol, making it incredibly easy to drink, and the absolute perfect choice for his very first alcoholic beverage. Feeling a bit nervous but polite, he offers his stammering thanks. Taking his very first sip, he immediately notes the sweet and tangy flavors washing over his palate. However, right on the heels of that pleasant sweetness, he detects a strange, faint sense of discomfort that begins to settle in. Surprised by the taste, he excitedly comments that it basically just tastes like standard soda, and she agrees that beginner-friendly drinks are indeed just alcoholic soda. Feeling relieved that his first drink was not nearly as bad as he expected, he admits he is actually starting to feel quite pumped, prompting her to eagerly announce the next drink on their lineup. She introduces a refreshing plum wine, calling it an absolute classic, must try that is well worth committing to memory. After trying it himself, he happily compares the taste to grated plum juice, thoroughly impressed by how delicious it actually is. The rich experience of the plum wine completely captivates him as the intense sweet aroma hits his nose directly, immediately followed by a deep, savory umami flavor that spreads beautifully across his tongue. He closes his eyes in bliss, feeling as though he is directly savoring the pure, unadulterated deliciousness of a perfectly ripe plum itself. But as he continues to casually sip on his sweet drink, a quiet realization begins to creep into his mind. He reminds himself that despite the pleasant fruity taste, he is indeed drinking actual alcohol, noting a sharp, unmistakable sting developing deep in his throat. His internal thoughts are cut short, however, as she loudly introduces their grand finale. She holds up a classic dry beer, dramatically declaring that they have absolutely got to drink this staple at least once, calling it the legendary hyper beer, as she cracks it open with a loud pop. Swept up in the momentum of the celebration, he tilts his head back and begins to gulp down the bitter, bubbly brew. He finishes the grand finale, slamming the empty can down as the bitter liquid fully settles in his stomach. He lets out a huge, satisfied gasp as the intense rush of carbonation and alcohol finally catches up to his system. He admits that the lingering savory aftertaste is surprisingly good and could easily become a new habit. She happily praises his impressive chug and hopes they can drink outside together soon, completely oblivious to the fact that his head is already spinning out of control. He stumbles over his words and asks if he looks unsteady, instantly confirming her suspicions that the alcohol has completely obliterated his senses. When he loudly protests that he is completely sober, she quickly shuts him down by pointing out that desperate denial is the ultimate proof of being totally wasted. Realizing he has hit his absolute limit, she softly instructs him to stay put while she fetches some much-needed water to sober him up. He completely refuses to let her walk away, desperately clinging to her clothes to anchor himself in his drunken haze. With his guard completely down, he quietly murmurs her name in a sudden, highly vulnerable shift in tone. The playful atmosphere instantly vanishes as she looks back at him, earnestly questioning if his affection for her is actually genuine. He immediately dismisses her lingering insecurities about their relationship being a joke, firmly declaring that she is the only person he will ever love. Hearing his completely unfiltered confession, she happily accepts his embrace and warmly admits that she is just as hopelessly in love with him. Capitalizing on the deeply intimate atmosphere they just created, she closes the distance between them and softly pleads for him to finally give her a kiss. With his defenses completely shattered by the alcohol, Takashi finally blurts out his most hidden feelings, completely shocked at his own sudden boldness for actually saying those words out loud. His direct confession leaves Kureha momentarily stunned, prompting her to softly seek confirmation about his true desires. Gathering every ounce of liquid courage, Takashi confesses that he genuinely wants to kiss her, because of how much he likes her, asking if she feels the same way, which prompts a shy and blushing admission from Kureha that she absolutely does. Despite their mutual feelings, Kureha hesitates and suggests that right now might not be the best moment to take such a big step. She firmly caps her drink, explaining that she values their relationship too much to let such a milestone moment happen while they are both heavily intoxicated. Instead, she sweetly asks if he can wait until the morning for their kiss, and after Takashi groggily agrees, he promptly passes out from the alcohol, bringing his chaotic 20th birthday to a peaceful end. The next morning arrives bright and early with the quiet sounds of birds chirping outside the apartment. Takashi wakes up with a massive hangover, his head throbbing in intense pain as the harsh reality of the morning after sets in. He struggles to piece his memories together, remembering the heavy drinking, but drawing a complete blank on their conversation afterward, until a familiar, comforting scent in his room catches his attention and sends him into a sudden panic. He is stunned to find his senior still in his apartment cooking a hangover-curing miso soup breakfast for him. And when he asks why she did not go home, she teasingly reminds him that she would never leave him alone, quietly hinting at the promise they made the night before. Kureha points out that his hair is an absolute disaster and suggests that he go wash his face first. Realizing how terrible his bedhead actually looks, Takashi panics in utter embarrassment. He immediately dashes off to the bathroom to fix his hair as fast as possible, leaving Kureha to happily gush about how adorable he is whenever he loses his cool. While trying to style his hair in front of the mirror, Takashi quietly doubts himself, wondering if he can ever truly become a man worthy of an amazing girlfriend like Kureha-senpai. He instantly gasps and shakes his head violently, desperately screaming at himself to stop having such pathetic and embarrassing thoughts right now. He sighs over his own lingering insecurity, desperately questioning if he is doomed to remain this weak-willed forever. Pumping himself up in front of his reflection, he orders himself to get his act together and declares that he absolutely has to toughen up from here on out. Shortly after, they sit down at the dining table to enjoy a lovely home-cooked breakfast together, starting the meal with a polite expression of gratitude. Taking a sip of the soup, Takashi is completely blown away by the rich, deeply absorbed flavors and happily praises her culinary skills, which makes Kureha swell with pride. During their conversation, Takashi asks about the promise she brought up earlier, prompting Kureha to awkwardly apologize for going too far with her teasing and making him uncomfortable. But the moment she mentions that he made a promise to her while he was completely drunk the night before, Takashi immediately chokes on his food and panics, desperately racking his brain to figure out what embarrassing secrets he might have accidentally blurted out. Kureha admits that even going forward, she probably won't be able to stop teasing him. She suddenly bares her soul, confessing that her deep love for him made her terrified to move their relationship forward, fearing he might end up hating her or thinking poorly of her. Takashi immediately rejects those fears, realizing how much she has been holding back her true feelings. Looking at her vulnerable expression, his heart races as he realizes just how irresistibly lovable his senior truly is. With a sudden shift in the atmosphere, she whispers that she is about to lose control and asks if they should finally take the plunge and do it. Takashi completely freezes up, his mind racing as he nervously questions what exactly she means by doing it. She casually breaks the tension with a playful grin, clarifying that she is talking about a kiss, as she closes the distance between them at the dinner table. When he wonders if she is going to stop just short and settle for an indirect kiss, she confidently counters that she won't be backing out and promises a direct one instead. She playfully lays out the progression, explaining how they will move from nose to nose contact straight to a real mouth-to-mouth kiss. Asking if he is finally done questioning everything, she smiles as he turns bright red and shyly begs her to go easy on him, since it is his very first time, which she warmly accepts. With a soft promise to be gentle for his very first time, she leans all the way in and finally seals the moment with a kiss. He reflects that their long-awaited first kiss finally happened, noting that the deeply anticipated moment carried the strangely comforting and domestic scent of miso soup. The intimate atmosphere fully envelops them as they pull back slightly, both of them completely flushed and overwhelmed by the sheer emotion of finally crossing that major threshold together. He completely surrenders to the moment, warmly admitting to himself that he really can never manage to win against his senior when she looks at him with such genuine affection. Calling out to her softly, he confesses that despite all the chaotic teasing and sudden changes, he has finally realized that being right by her side is exactly what feels right to him. The morning arrives, shifting the scene to the busy city streets as she heads out for the day completely lost in her own world. Unable to contain her overwhelming joy, she completely loses her composure in public, letting out a massive sigh of relief, and mentally squealing over the fact that she actually went through with the kiss. She shyly admits to herself that the only reason she held back from intimacy for so long was out of fear of coming across as too easy, but now that the seal is broken, she is already desperately craving another kiss. She rationalizes that the liquid courage was the only thing that finally pushed her to make a move, deciding that relying on alcohol occasionally isn't such a bad thing after all. However, her pleasant daydreaming is abruptly cut short when a couple of random guys on the streets spot her blushing and immediately try to hit on her. Her sweet demeanor vanishes in a flash, replaced by a freezing, terrifyingly apathetic glare, as she completely dismisses the strangers, internally declaring that other guys do not matter to her in the slightest. Reflecting on the true depths of her affection, she thinks back to their college club's welcome party 2 years ago, where she first noticed him sitting all by himself, reaffirming that he is the only serious guy for her, especially since she is the exclusive witness to his adorable hidden side. Takashi is completely dazed and flustered after their sudden, intimate moment, unable to hide his blush. Kureha is also deeply affected, her eyes reflecting a mixture of shyness and lingering emotion as she looks back at him. While heading home, Kureha lets out a loud shout into the street, unable to contain her excitement, and screaming how badly she wants to start living with Takashi soon. A few days have passed since the topic of moving in together first came up, and Takashi receives a text from Kureha announcing she is on her way over to his place to hang out. While cleaning up his apartment to get ready for her arrival, Takashi finds himself reflecting on the status of their plans. He wonders what is actually going on with the cohabitation plan, since she keeps dodging the question whenever he asks, but his thoughts are cut short by the doorbell and her voice asking him to open up. Opening the door, she happily admits she simply wanted him to answer the door for her today, showing up with a massive suitcase in hand. When he confusedly asks about her luggage, she cheerfully reveals that she has brought the complete cohabitation starter kit to his room, leaving him in absolute panic, as he realizes their life together is starting this very day. Takashi internally grumbles about how his senior always gets her way, recalling her sudden cohabitation proposal, and that unexpected kiss right when she casually strolls into his apartment to move in. Feeling completely caught off guard, Takashi complains that she should have at least given him a day's notice so he could mentally prepare himself for this major transition. Kureha playfully teases him about being anxious despite his loud denials, but she quickly turns serious, admitting that her silence was actually due to her own lack of courage. She shyly confesses that she is still a girl who worries about their future, admitting her deep fear that he might discover her weird habits during cohabitation and grow to hate her. Her unexpectedly sweet and vulnerable confession catches Takashi completely off guard, leaving him deeply touched and utterly speechless. Though he remains constantly puzzled by her rapidly shifting emotions, Takashi resolves to put in his absolute best effort so she never gets tired of him either. Their emotional moment is suddenly interrupted by a heartwarming note from Kureha's mother, pleading with him to spend his future with her selfish daughter. Reading the earnest letter, Takashi is instantly struck with a wave of intense shock and anxiety. While Kureha sighs in embarrassment over her mother's dramatic message, Takashi feels the suffocating weight of parental expectations before his senior quickly shifts their focus back to the task at hand. With the heavy emotional talks finally out of the way, she aggressively gets down to business to kick off the official and chaotic start of their new life together. Kureha abruptly breaks the intimate atmosphere by excitedly proposing they drink, leaving Takashi to sigh and realize she is already right back to her usual lazy self. However, as Takashi watches her, his eyes are drawn to her lips, noting that she actually matched her lipstick with her outfit today. Kureha immediately calls him out for staring so intensely at her lips, teasingly saying anyone would notice, which leaves Takashi highly flustered as he frantically defends his gaze. She playfully labels him a pervert for watching her, but admits she loves his honest side the most before offering him a choice of sweet or bitter canned drinks and agreeing to a sweet one with him. With their drinks selected, they raise their cans and a happy toast to officially celebrate starting their new cohabitation. They both dive right in, taking long gulps of their sweet sake as the relaxing flavor begins to wash over them. Savoring the sugary taste, Kureha lets out a deeply satisfied sigh and thoroughly enjoys her drink. Setting her drink down, she happily notes that the alcohol is already starting to kick in and affect her mood perfectly. Leaning in, she suddenly asks if they should finally give him that sweet kiss he wanted, completely catching Takashi off guard and causing him to instantly spit his drink everywhere. While Takashi desperately protests and denies ever asking for such a thing, she mischievously counters that his choice of a sweet drink was the ultimate proof of his true desires. She playfully points out that she has been mentally preparing for intimacy ever since they first toasted, acting surprised when he defensively claims he didn't pick the drink with any ulterior motives. He lets out a defeated groan as she completely closes the physical distance between them on the couch. When he squirms and complains that his ears are ticklish, she leans in closer, highly amused by the discovery that he is unexpectedly sensitive there. He weakly accuses her of just messing with him again, but she boldly confesses that she simply cannot stop teasing him because she is completely obsessed with his adorable, flustered reactions. Looming over him with a highly satisfied and smug grin, she happily notes that his face has suddenly turned even redder than before. He grunts in sheer panic and embarrassment, totally overwhelmed by her aggressive approach and completely trapped by her overwhelming presence. Realizing he is being completely played with, he tries to turn away, but she playfully demands he look at her so they can a sweet kiss, before suddenly pressing her peach drink against his lips. She affectionately pats his head in praise after he takes a sip, clarifying that the sweet taste was just a playful, indirect kiss, while mysteriously warning him to be much more careful next time. Sliding a highly suggestive adult book onto the table, she slyly admits that she deliberately held back tonight because she is certain she would completely lose control if they went any further. Licking her lips in pure anticipation, she leaves him with the terrifyingly exciting promise that she fully intends to make his wildest fantasies a reality very soon. Kureha introduces her latest idea for some couples fun, pulling out a pack of chocolate sticks and enthusiastically declaring that they are going to play the stick game. She bites into one end and tells him to slowly nibble his way toward her, prompting Takashi to resolve that he won't let her tease and dominate the situation like she always does, as he immediately bites onto the other end. Without hesitating, both of them begin steadily crunching through the chocolate stick from opposite ends, rapidly narrowing the gap between them. Kureha is highly amused and praises his enthusiastic effort, warmly urging him to keep coming closer. As they reach the limit and the stick is almost completely gone, Takashi gets incredibly nervous and tries to suggest they should call it quits, but she shows no signs of stopping. Ignoring his sudden cold feet, she eagerly leans in and plants a direct kiss right on his lips, completely catching him off guard. The deep kiss completely takes his breath away as the sweet, lingering taste of chocolate fills his senses. Pulling back just a bit, she giggles mischievously and happily notes how incredibly sweet the kiss tasted. When a deeply flustered Takashi tries to process what just happened, Kureha immediately commands him to take the chocolate side for the next round, completely shutting down his panic over whether they are actually going to keep playing. Holding him close, she boldly reminds him that she already warned him she wouldn't be holding back, promising to shower him with sweet kisses until she is fully satisfied. The room is filled with soft, muffled sounds as Takashi and Kureha lose themselves in another sweet and incredibly intense kiss. After pulling back, Kureha thoughtfully eyes her sweet peach alcohol, deciding that the occasion calls for an even higher level of sweetness. She finds a highly playful way to her favorite drink, letting the sweet peach liquor drip from a snack stick before offering it directly to him. With the sweet treat in her mouth, she boldly invites him to join her for another round, leaving Takashi completely flustered and gulping in anticipation. Giving in to her playful advances, Takashi internally grumbles about how incredibly sneaky and irresistible his senior can be when she wants to be. The romantic atmosphere in the quiet room quickly heats up as they completely lose track of everything else, sharing quiet whispers and breathless sighs. As the intimate tension between them reaches its absolute peak, Takashi softly calls out her name in a quiet daze. Realizing she is getting way too affectionate and acting unusually intoxicated, a heavily flustered Takashi desperately tries to get them both to calm down and take a breather. She sloppily confesses her desire to completely melt together with him, prompting Takashi to instantly confiscate her drink, but she quickly pouts and asks if he will personally make up for what he just took away. Takashi is completely dumbfounded, his heart racing at maximum speed as he tries to process whether she is actually demanding him to be her substitute source of sweetness. Takashi boldly declares that even without the influence of sake he would still be fully satisfied with a deep kiss. She softly asks him if he will actually give her one. Faced with her direct request, Takashi grunts in sudden intense nervousness as he tries to process his own racing heartbeat. After a brief silence, he gathers his courage and quietly agrees that he will indeed go through with it. Taking the lead, Takashi asserts that he will make sure to completely satisfy his senior as he gets close, catching her completely off guard and leaving her squeaking in surprise, as she finds herself overwhelmed by his sudden boldness. Blushing furiously, she shyly complains that he shouldn't tease her like that. Instead of backing down, Takashi gently tells her that he is going to keep going, then to which she quietly agrees. Closing the distance completely, they lean in together as the tension between them reaches its absolute peak. On the living room sofa, the two of them finally a deeply passionate kiss, softly whispering their mutual love for one another. As Takashi warmly reaffirms his love for his senior, she completely melts in pure shyness, leaving Takashi to silently think about how incredibly cute she looks when she is the one getting overwhelmed. Settling comfortably against him, she playfully complains that he is being unusually mean and admits she fully expected him to be much more aggressive tonight. He immediately counters, pointing out that since she constantly teases him without mercy, this little role reversal simply makes them even. He softly explains that he just couldn't resist playing along because she looked so incredibly happy, teasing him, his voice trailing off as he struggles to articulate just how special she is to him. Sensing his lingering hesitation, she completely lowers her defenses and tenderly reassures him that she would gladly accept absolutely anything he wants to do to her, as long as it is him taking the lead. Her absolute surrender completely flips a switch in his mind, his previous hesitation vanishing in an instant as a sudden intense wave of determination takes over. He takes a nervous gulp, stealing his resolve as he prepares to finally abandon his timid nature and take full control of the deeply intimate moment. Without a single warning, he aggressively closes the distance and captures her lips, completely shocking her with his sudden, overwhelming burst of dominance. As they pull back to catch their breath, he boldly reminds her of his promise to fully satisfy her, noting that finally taking the lead for a kiss is a massive personal victory for him, while she softly basks in her overwhelming love for him. Completely flushed by his sudden aggression, she heavily breathes out a warning that she will absolutely lose all control if they continue, playfully suggesting they limit themselves to just kissing for tonight, while he notes just how dangerously aroused she is actually getting. Completely ignoring her suggestion to pace themselves, his own desires fully take the wheel as he fiercely pulls her right back in for another passionate kiss, entirely throwing his own restraint out the window. Breaking the kiss with a frustrated click of his tongue, he begins to heavily panic, realizing that his own self-control is rapidly deteriorating the longer this goes on. Takashi tries to mentally prepare himself and establish some boundaries, telling himself that even if his senior is the one initiating things, they are strictly only going to go as far as kissing. However, the hours slip away as they get completely lost in each other, continuing their endless kissing session throughout the entire day. By late afternoon, Kuriha complains that her mouth is completely sticky, prompting Takashi to dryly point out that is the inevitable result of playing the chocolate stick game for hours on end. Realizing they spent the entire night playing and didn't even bother to unpack any of her belongings, Kuriha casually suggests that they should skip their college classes for the day. After verifying that both of their attendance records are in good shape, they agree that skipping just one day is totally fine, though Takashi feels a bit guilty since it is his very first time playing hooky. Reflecting on his sudden rebellion, Takashi confesses to himself that despite his initial guilt, skipping class to spend the day with her actually does not feel bad at all. In fact, he admits that being relaxed at home has made him feel liberated enough to say things he normally keeps hidden, turning to call out to his senior. Empowered by this sudden wave of honesty, Takashi turns to her and boldly asks if she wants to crawl into bed and sleep together. His surprisingly forward offer catching her by surprise, Kuriha simply responds with a soft, warm smile that leaves him completely spellbound. She playfully teases him about making such a naughty proposal, making him frantically stutter in denial, before she laughs it off as a joke and promises they will be together soon. Takashi happily accepts his defeat, realizing that while he can never win against his older girlfriend, this cozy and chaotic lifestyle is exactly what makes him happy. The scene shifts to the bathroom where Kiriha hums happily to herself while taking a warm, relaxing shower. Reflecting on the intense romantic tension from the night before, she admits that she almost lost control, realizing that having some solitary downtime is absolutely crucial to keep her from craving more than just simple kisses. She confesses to herself that she is so deeply in love with him that she doesn't even want to go to class, realizing that while she thinks about him constantly, she simply cannot help how completely and helplessly she has fallen for him. Stepping out of the bathroom, she resolves that she absolutely cannot let him see her vulnerabilities and must keep up a strong, confident guard. She decides that around the person she loves, she wants to be a much bolder and more capable version of herself than usual. Having successfully finished tidying up her space, Kiriha lets out a satisfied sigh of relief, proudly celebrating that all of her cleaning is finally complete. Takashi reflects on the fact that 3 days have already flown by since Kiriha moved in, lamenting that she teased him so relentlessly, even wearing special lingerie, that he couldn't get a single thing done. Realizing how late it has gotten and that he ended up skipping 3 whole days of class, he panics about catching up on his schoolwork, though Kiriha reminds him that his friend was at least covering for him. Despite her attempt to reassure him, Takashi deeply dreads facing his friend, fully aware that she will shamelessly pry into what kept him so busy. As soon as he finally makes it to the university, his friend immediately spots him and calls him a slacker for finally showing up. She complains that his sudden arrival ruined her free ride, explaining that she covered for him in hopes of blackmailing him into buying her a nice barbecue lunch. Takashi breathes a quiet sigh of relief to himself, introducing his one and only best friend, Yu Sonoda, while noting that dodging her legendary appetite saved his wallet from total disaster. Yu demands to know why he skipped class for 3 whole days, threatening to force him to pay for a massive barbecue if he refuses to fess up, which quickly makes Takashi cave. Blushing furiously, Takashi quietly admits that he skipped class simply because he wanted to spend his time cuddling with Kiriha-senpai. Outraged that she was used as cover while he was busy flirting with his girlfriend, Yu immediately upgrades his penalty back to an expensive barbecue on his dime, completely shutting down his desperate pleas of honesty. Takashi frantically tries to justify the situation by explaining that he didn't have a choice because Kiriha suddenly showed up with all her belongings to move in, which instantly catches Yu's attention. Takashi's friend is completely baffled by the revelation that Kiriha already brought all her stuff over, prompting Takashi to casually confirm that they are indeed officially living together right now. His friend loudly complains about being kept in the dark about this massive life update, to which Takashi awkwardly replies that he simply never found the right time to bring it up. His buddy immediately teases him for caving to the pressure and being as weak-willed as ever. Takashi gets defensive, insisting that he genuinely wanted to spend all his time with his senior too, but his friend just laughs it off, pointing out that Takashi is always the one getting bossed around anyway, before suggestively asking what exactly goes down between them at night. The mere mention of their intimate nighttime activities instantly sends Takashi into a full-blown panic, as his face flushes completely red. As the classroom starts buzzing with curious murmurs, his friend laughs off the idea, confidently assuming that an older girlfriend would never pull any crazy or nasty moves on him. When his friend demands solid proof of their relationship, a heavily flustered Takashi desperately blurts out that they kissed all night long and even slept in the exact same bed together, causing the entire room to completely freeze in shock. The surrounding students immediately start whispering in disbelief, assuming Takashi is completely delusional and getting played by the popular Kiriha-senpai, which causes an incredibly terrifying and dark aura to radiate throughout the room as Takashi sweats in pure terror. The teacher quickly snaps everyone back to reality, ordering the class to quiet down and save the gossip for later, while Kiriha simply rests her chin on her hand, looking thoroughly annoyed by the entire situation. Later on, the chaotic school day finally comes to an end, as the sun begins to set over the busy city buildings. Meeting up afterward, a heavily slumped Takashi immediately apologizes for his embarrassing outburst in front of everyone, but Kiriha gently reassures him that it is perfectly fine, admitting that she was also at fault for pushing his buttons earlier. He nervously double-checks to make sure she isn't actually mad at him anymore, And she quickly reassures him that she isn't heartless enough to hold a grudge, though he still feels a lingering sense of unease. The scene suddenly shifts to a sizzling grill as Takashi realizes they ended up at a yakiniku restaurant after all. Kiriha smugly corrects him, proudly declaring that it is actually a combined barbecue and izakaya joint renowned for its top-tier alcohol. He sweats and argues that it is still just a barbecue spot at the end of the day. Kiriha nonchalantly brushes him off, pointing out that since he casually threw around bold claims about them sleeping together, treating him to a heavy meal makes total sense. Ordering from the digital menu, she tells him to stop complaining and offers to let his earlier slip-up slide completely as long as he treats her to the all-you-can-eat course. He can only grumble in defeat, noting that paying for an endless buffet isn't exactly a fair compromise. As the fresh cuts of meat sizzle on the grill, she checks to make sure he is fine with eating awful, offering to order something else if he isn't. He quickly assures her that he has no problem eating it, prompting a highly satisfied response from his senior. With their food cooking and their massive beer mugs fully loaded, they happily clink their glasses together for a lively toast to kick off the meal. Taking a deep drink of her beer, she casually asks how he is actually finding their brand new living arrangement so far. He nervously admits that even though it just started, it has been a lot of fun, only for her to completely throw him off balance by slyly asking about a certain specific thing. His mind immediately flashes to his hidden adult magazines, and he breaks into a cold sweat. He completely panics as he realizes she is talking about his dirty books, and that she had actually figured out his secret stash right from the very beginning. She bluntly reminds him of her earlier instruction to intentionally leave his dirty magazines out in the open for her to see. He shrinks back in total embarrassment, weakly admitting that he completely forgot she had pushed the joke that far. Flashing a dangerously smug and teasing smile, she promises that she will at least hear him out if he ever wants to try anything specific from those dirty books. However, she quickly locks him in, firmly warning him that she fully expects a very fair and satisfying return on her investment. Takashi reflects on his easygoing relationship with Yu, realizing that talking to his best friend is so effortless that it honestly feels just like chatting with one of the guys. Upon returning home to his apartment, Takashi nervously calls out for Kiriha-senpai, bracing himself for whatever reaction awaits him. Finding his girlfriend in a massive sulk, Takashi desperately begs her to cheer up already, though she remains completely unimpressed. Kiriha is absolutely furious that he treated another girl to barbecue, dramatically disowning him while Takashi desperately tries to explain himself. She quickly deduces that he even drank alcohol with her, leaving him utterly terrified by how she managed to sniff out his secrets so easily. Desperate to escape the doghouse, Takashi pleads to know what he can do to earn her forgiveness, prompting a tense silence before Kiriha finally declares that she has made up her mind. Kiriha delivers her ultimate verdict, declaring that she won't be giving him a single kiss until he completely sobers up, and ordering him to spend the entire day repenting for his sins, which leaves Takashi shouting in utter disbelief. She smugly adds that she knows he doesn't actually hate kissing, while Takashi mentally reels in shock, unable to believe that the very senior who is usually constantly pushing him for kisses would actually weaponize them against him. Takashi immediately begs for mercy, desperately apologizing and arguing that a whole day of withholding affection is simply too cruel, but Kiriha flatly shuts him down and insists that he needs to properly reflect on his actions. Takashi internally grumbles that he was only dragged along by his friend and barely had a single drink, never imagining that his senior would get this incredibly angry, or that she might have an even harsher punishment waiting for him. Kiriha suddenly softens, earnestly reminding him that he is indeed her boyfriend, and telling him that he needs to fully realize it, leaving Takashi completely flustered as he quietly murmurs her name. Takashi is completely frozen on the sofa, feeling like her sudden extreme closeness on his lap is less of a reward and more of a punishment, but he quickly backs down when she playfully questions if he even has the right to refuse. Giggling, Kiriha tells him to enjoy his calm moments while he can, and declares that even if he begs for it, she is banning all kisses today, making him realize she is absolutely having way too much fun tormenting him. She leans in even closer to deliver a teasing whisper, suggesting that since kisses are off limits, they should try some of the other suggestive things from the adult magazine she found in his room the other day. Sputtering in embarrassment, Takashi tries to play it cool, stammering that he can handle this much, and that it actually feels like a reward, before nervously asking if she is truly okay with going that far. With a highly mischievous and confident grin, Kureha teasingly wonders exactly how long he will be able to keep calling this intense tease a reward. Declaring they should start with something light to warm things up, she takes his hand and places it directly against her chest, causing Takashi to completely lose his mind in sheer panic and yell for her to wait. As he gasps out her name, completely overwhelmed by where his hand has just been placed, Kureha simply looks back at him with an incredibly soft and triumphant smile. She directly asks if he likes having his wrist held securely against her chest, like this, thoroughly enjoying his helplessness. He internally admits that while he has seen this exact seductive scenario in his magazines before, he never actually expected to experience it in real life. And when he nervously squeaks out an agreement, she warmly praises him like a good boy. But right in the middle of their incredibly passionate and spicy moment, she casually pulls out a fresh can of orange Chu-Hai and decides she wants to drink, next leaving Takashi absolutely dumbfounded at her sudden shift in focus. Kureha takes her new drink and slowly drips the sweet orange Chu-Hai directly onto her chest, letting it trickle down her skin. Takashi's eye widens in absolute shock as his brain completely short-circuits at the jaw-dropping sight unfolding right in front of him. He stands completely dazed in his spot, frantically questioning what on earth she is trying to do, and why she is taking things to such a wild extreme. Looming over him with a highly seductive expression, she mockingly asks if he is actually in disbelief over what is happening next. She leans down and plants a highly passionate kiss directly onto his hand where it is held against her, letting the sweet flavor of the alcohol melt into the highly intimate touch. Overwhelmed by the intense sensation, Takashi's thoughts completely scramble as he weakly protests that this level of pleasure is supposed to be his punishment. Although he tries to reason that a proper punishment is supposed to make him suffer rather than feel incredibly happy, he internally admits that he is actually enjoying every single second of her intense affection. Completely ignoring his logical arguments, she closes in again, pressing her lips intimately against his skin to continue her sensual assault. Takashi can only let out breathless groans as she continues to shower him with deep, wet kisses, completely melting away his remaining sanity. When Takashi desperately yells that they have completely crossed the line, she simply teases that perhaps it wasn't exciting enough and playfully threatens to pour even more alcohol onto herself, leaving him to frantically wonder how his simple punishment turned into such a chaotic situation. Leaning in with a captivating gaze, Kureha playfully points out that he isn't holding back his intense stares at all and wonders exactly why that might be. Takashi stammers as he realizes his total lack of restraint, while Kureha giggles and teasingly reminds him that under their current circumstances, even a simple kiss is strictly off-limits. Gripping the sofa in absolute agony, Takashi mentally screams that this forbidden setup is pure torture, desperately confessing to himself that he wants nothing more than to push her down and kiss her right then and there. Driven by his overwhelming desires, he resolves that he wants to completely turn the tables and finally see his usually composed senior break down in absolute panic for once. Gathering every last ounce of his courage, he stammers out her name to nervously break the heavy silence between them. Kureha notices his strained expression and asks what is wrong, but his bold resolve instantly crumbles as he completely chickens out and weakly claims he just needs to use the bathroom. She nods along with a knowing smirk, but just as he tries to make his hasty escape, she stops him dead in his tracks by slyly questioning if he is truly only going to the bathroom. He nervously tries to play it off by blaming all the drinks he had, but she leans in closer, playfully stating that her sharp girlfriend intuition is telling her there is a completely different reason behind his sudden urge to flee. Utterly caught off guard by her spot on intuition, he stammers in sheer panic, while she happily revels in his incredibly flustered and transparent reaction. She completely corners him, teasingly asking if he actually wants to let all of his pent-up desires out, which surprisingly prompts him to finally push back and nervously ask what she would do if he actually said yes. When Takashi silently groans over his own massive blunder, Kureha seizes the moment to guilt-trip him, clutching her chest and dramatically complaining that her heart aches knowing her boyfriend goes drinking with other girls. She lays the guilt on thick, completely cornering him by demanding to know if he genuinely intended to finish himself off, while completely ignoring his cute girlfriend, ruthlessly reminding him that he is still technically being punished for his earlier behavior. Leaning in with a deeply wounded expression, she softly pleads that he wouldn't actually choose to be alone over spending their lovey-dovey time together, leaving him completely paralyzed by her incredibly lonely eyes. Instantly overwhelmed by immense guilt for making her feel unwanted, Takashi quietly admits that his hasty plan to lock himself in the bathroom was completely inconsiderate of her feelings. He firmly apologizes and promises not to run away anymore, resolving to take whatever punishment she has planned for him until the very end, because he cannot bear to be the reason she looks so sad. Locking eyes with her, he confidently declares that he absolutely won't flee until she is fully and completely satisfied. She turns away, slightly keeping her expression hidden, and quietly states that she will hold him to his promise of staying by her side to endure the punishment until the end. However, she immediately breaks the tense atmosphere with a bright, cheerful clap, surprisingly announcing that she is going to end his punishment right then and there. She reveals with a highly satisfied smile that his serious, determined expression was more than enough to appease her, happily declaring that they can go right back to their usual flirting. Takashi immediately bursts into tears of sheer relief, desperately thanking his lucky stars that he was forgiven, while simultaneously swearing he will never go easy on her the next time they play around. She passionately asserts that if he absolutely must go out to eat with another person, he needs to follow some strict ground rules. She suddenly breaks her serious lecture to bluntly point out that he has been desperately holding in his bathroom break this entire time, and tells him to just go use the restroom, already leaving him totally flustered. As soon as Takashi retreats to the bathroom, Kureha softly sighs to herself and admits that there is absolutely no way she could ever actually bring herself to hate him. Left alone, she starts to feel a wave of guilt, quietly apologizing to Takashi in her mind and worrying that she might have gone a bit too far and been too mean to him. She wishes he would understand even just a fraction of her jealousy, admitting to herself that simply seeing him next to another girl makes her chest tighten up with painful possessiveness. Nervously slumping down, she wonders to herself if he is secretly angry with her for throwing such a massive fit. Savoring his lingering warmth, she lets out a soft giggle and tenderly admits to herself that she is the one who ultimately can never win against him because of how deeply she loves him. Later that evening, Takashi stands waiting on the city street, taking a deep breath as he mentally prepares himself for his very first night date with Kureha. He nervously checks his phone, recalling that they never had a late night date before they started living together due to her strict curfew, and just as he begins to worry about his outfit choice, she loudly calls out his name from a distance. Kureha finally arrives for their much-anticipated evening out, cheerfully thanking Takashi for waiting as she steps onto the scene looking absolutely stunning in her date outfit. Completely mesmerized by how incredibly grown up and beautiful his senior looks tonight, Takashi nervously stammers that he hasn't been waiting long at all, prompting Kureha to playfully tease him for lying since she explicitly told him to head out ahead of her. Desperate to change the subject and hide his massive blush, Takashi awkwardly asks where they are heading next. With a mischievous giggle, Kureha boldly suggests they hit up a bar tonight, leaving him completely shocked by the sudden mature change in plans. Instantly suspicious, Takashi nervously wonders about the sudden change of pace, since his senior rarely drinks out, heavily suspecting she is secretly scheming something. He mentally hypes himself up, resolving that he absolutely needs to learn how to fight back if her only goal is to tease him all night. Kureha calmly explains that she spent some time thinking about how they could actually go out and have fun together, leaving Takashi completely confused about what triggered this sudden planning. She casually drops an absolute bombshell, revealing that her motivation sparked right after he went on that supposed cheating barbecue date with his female best friend, instantly sending Takashi into a terrified, sweating panic. Frantically trying to defend his life, Takashi sputters that he thought they had already cleared up that entire misunderstanding, desperately insisting that Yuu is strictly just a friend. Without missing a beat, Kureha smoothly reassures him that she totally understands and completely accepts that part of the story. Flashing a highly smug and confident smirk, Kureha cheerfully adds that the entire ordeal simply made her realize just how incredibly deeply and hopelessly he truly loves her. Completely caught off guard by her bold and sudden declaration, Takashi stammers helplessly, entirely unable to form a single coherent sentence. Kureha simply giggles in pure amusement, happily cooing over how ridiculously cute he looks whenever he gets this flustered. Fully satisfied with her teasing and the romantic mood, Kureha happily interlocks her fingers with his and cheerfully declares that it is finally time to get their evening started, easily pulling a heavily blushing Takashi along for their big date. Leaning in close with a deeply captivating and affectionate gaze, she softly asks for his confirmation, leaving him completely powerless to resist following her lead for the rest of the night. Feeling the sting of another playful jab, Takashi realizes he has been completely teased, once again blushing furiously, as he can only muster a shaky, embarrassed agreement to his senior's latest comment. As they walk together into the night, he quietly steels his resolve, determined to make tonight the night he finally turns the tables and refuses to get messed with anymore. Strolling down the street, they reflect on how strange it feels to finally be on their very first night date together. Kureha explains that her father used to enforce a strict 9 o'clock curfew, leaving Takashi to sigh in intimidation over how strict her dad actually sounds. Takashi points out the massive contradiction, noting that, despite how terrifyingly strict her father supposedly is, he still somehow agreed to let the two of them move in together. When Takashi bravely suggests that he should formally introduce himself to her father in person, sometime Kureha enthusiastically agrees before quickly changing the subject and pointing out that they have finally arrived at their destination. Looking at the quiet building directory, Takashi notes that the venue has the cozy vibe of a hidden local gem, while Kureha warmly admits that she absolutely loves coming to this spot. As they head inside, Kureha explains that she used to frequent this quiet spot on her days off. When a nervous Takashi admits that this is his very first time visiting a bar, she leans in close to sweetly confess that it is also her first time sharing a bar date with someone else. She playfully teases him for looking away and being so shy, reassuring him that there is absolutely no reason to hide his embarrassment, since she is actually feeling quite nervous herself. With his heart pounding rapidly in his chest, Takashi wonders if she is truly just as excited as he is, desperately wishing he had some way to gather his courage so he could confidently look her in the face. Kureha immediately throws him into a panic by playfully inviting him to touch her chest to verify her racing heartbeat, laughing it off as a joke just as they open the door to enter the bar. They decide to change locations, stepping into a much more sophisticated and quiet bar to continue their evening in a classier atmosphere. Kureha confidently takes charge, ordering a couple of sweet and easy-to-drink starters from the bartender. Takashi can't help but feel incredibly impressed, silently thinking about how remarkably grown-up and mature she seems in this kind of environment. Kureha admits she leaves the cocktail choices entirely to the bartender, because she can't remember all the different names, prompting Takashi to suggest she should learn her favorites to look like a mature woman, though she quickly laughs it off and says she has no need to learn them now. She catches him completely off guard by declaring that she will only ever visit this bar when she is with him, playfully ordering him to study up on the menu today so he can personally teach her all about the different drinks from now on. The bartender soon delivers their order, presenting them with a beautifully prepared peach cocktail and a classic fuzzy navel. They warmly hold hands under the bar counter as they raise their glasses for a quiet, intimate toast to celebrate their special night out together. Takashi prepares to take his first sip, thoroughly amazed by how fancy and sophisticated the entire presentation is. As the sweet flavor washes over his tongue, the sugary taste immediately triggers a sudden wave of familiarity. He fondly reminisces about their very first night living together, recalling how they drank sweet peach sake on the couch, before getting completely carried away in their very first intimate moment. Takashi nervously gulps down his drink, worrying that he is drinking way too quickly, but he is completely thrown off guard when Kureha orders next and refers to him as her neighbor to the bartender, which makes him click his tongue in disappointment. The bartender quickly gets to work on their order, while Takashi's heart beats wildly as he overanalyzes her choice of words, desperately hoping she used the term neighbor as an affectionate pointer for her boyfriend, rather than just some random guy. He hesitantly asks if she is sure she should be drinking so fast, clarifying that he is actually quite anxious about their spending budget, but she playfully misinterprets it and asks if he is just deeply worried about her. Giggling, she calls him sweet for worrying, prompting him to wonder if this is really the time to be playing around, before she slyly offers to spill the beans so he can stop stressing and focus entirely on her. She shows him an unbelievably cheap student-exclusive menu, offering endless all-you-can-drink cocktails with absolutely no time limit, leaving Takashi completely floored and realizing that they do not have to worry about the bill at all. As the bartender serves up their fresh drinks, Kureha smugly notes that their financial worries are officially over, and Takashi can only agree. With a warm, soft smile, she tells him that since this is their very first time visiting a proper bar together, she expects his complete, undivided attention tonight. Her direct request leaves Takashi blushing intensely as he stammeringly admits to himself that he wants the exact same thing. Gathering his courage, Takashi boldly declares that he wants to take his time and slowly enjoy the drink together with her, which makes her tease him for suddenly speaking so confidently. Taking a sip of her drink, she playfully adds that he is already completely flustered anyway, leaving Takashi to let out a defeated groan. Takashi suddenly takes the initiative and boldly declares that he isn't going to let the night end just yet, calling her out for being just as flustered as he is despite her usual seniority. His unexpected burst of raw confidence completely catches Kureha off guard, leaving her utterly stunned and speechless. Unable to handle his sudden directness, she immediately turns away to hide her burning face, prompting a confused reaction from him as he checks on her. She awkwardly laughs off the intense moment and openly admits defeat, conceding that he definitely got the better of her this time around. He completely zeroes in on the fact that her ears are burning bright red, fully exposing just how deeply embarrassed she actually is. She completely loses her composure in sheer disbelief over her own reaction, leaving a heavily flustered Takashi amazed at seeing her so incredibly vulnerable. When he eagerly asks if she is actually blushing, she desperately defends herself, confessing that her reaction is obvious since she has been eagerly looking forward to holding his hand for so long. Connecting all the dots from her sudden shift in demeanor, Takashi excitedly realizes that his usually dominant senior gets unexpectedly weak and timid when drinking in an unfamiliar place. Fueled by the liquid courage of his very first bar experience, Takashi boldly decides that he is finally going to take the lead and secure a total victory against her tonight. Takashi is completely out of it, groggily calling out to his senior as the hours slip by and the alcohol continues to completely overwhelm his system. Clinging tightly to his glass, Takashi admits that his head feels incredibly fuzzy, completely unable to focus on his surroundings as the heavy drinks finally take their toll. Although Takashi initially planned to turn the tables on his senior, he quickly admits that he is completely wasted after drinking far too much. Kureha giggles and notes that watching him is starting to make her feel tipsy too, only to laugh when Takashi claims she is turning incredibly wiggly and point out that he is simply seeing double. Despite his heavily intoxicated state, Takashi delivers a sudden, incredibly sweet confession, warmly telling his senior that he loves her absolutely no matter what, and that she is free to be as wiggly as she wants, leaving Kureha completely speechless. Deeply touched by his sudden sincerity, Kureha blushes furiously and takes a quick sip of her wine to hide her embarrassment, softly stuttering his name as her heart completely skips a beat. The romantic atmosphere is suddenly interrupted as the bartender serves them a sweet Kahlua and milk complete with a highly suggestive heart-shaped couple's straw. Seizing the playful opportunity, Kureha smugly asks Takashi if he wants to the drink with her, and a heavily dazed Takashi weakly agrees. Completely surrendering to the heavy alcohol, Takashi mutters that he no longer cares about what happens next, prompting a highly concerned Kureha to frantically ask if he is actually going to be okay. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out to Takashi as his best friend Yu walks over in her work uniform, demanding to know why he is getting so incredibly trashed. Takashi is completely shocked to find her there, but Yu bluntly reveals that she actually works at this bar and only brought over some water to see who the pathetic passed-out customer was. The sudden shock instantly sobering him up, Takashi frantically apologizes in utter humiliation, deeply regretting how he completely made a fool of himself. He desperately begs for his senior's forgiveness, admitting that he was so obsessed with trying to take the lead that he ended up being totally disrespectful to her, and even apologizes to Yu for causing a scene. Kureha gently reassures Takashi that it is completely fine and tells him not to sweat his drunken blunder, quickly shifting her focus to a much more pressing matter. Turning to Takashi's best friend, Kureha directly asks what exactly the deal is between her and Takashi. After a brief realization, Yuu bluntly counters by asking if she is this idiot's girlfriend, which Kureha nervously confirms. Yuu sincerely apologizes for dragging Takashi out for Korean barbecue the other day, explaining she was just annoyed that he was the only one having a good time. Kureha calmly responds that it is perfectly fine since Takashi already explained everything to her, before preparing to ask a sudden question. Kureha points out that since Yuu is technically on the clock working at the bar, she should probably take off her hood, leaving her best friend momentarily flustered and caught off guard. Pulling her hood down even tighter, Yuu admits that a lot has been going on lately and confesses that she would honestly really rather not take it off right now. Yuu admits that her behavior probably looks unprofessional, but since she usually stays in the back of the bar anyway, she begs Kureha to just let it slide, leaving her senior to silently stare back in deep suspicion. Kureha mutters to herself that it seems Yuu has her own heavy baggage to deal with as well, prompting a highly confused reaction from Yuu over her choice of words. Brushing it off as just talking to herself, Kureha decides that they should probably wrap things up and calls out to get their bill so they can head home. Yuu generously insists on letting them off the hook for the bill, offering to have her manager make their drinks on the house as an apology for the trouble she caused the other day. When Kureha initially protests, but ultimately gives in and accepts, Takashi can only watch in utter bewilderment, sweating as he wonders how on earth the two of them suddenly became so friendly. Walking home under the night sky, Takashi beats himself up over his massive blunders, realizing he got way too hung up on trying to take the lead and completely ruined his drinking pace. He mentally curses his own foolishness, lamenting that he ruined their special night, even though his senior explicitly told him she just wanted to take things slow and enjoy herself. Kureha firmly resolves to herself that she needs to make absolutely sure the other girl's desires remain her top priority. Stepping away from the main floor, the scene shifts to the quiet privacy of the restroom. Standing quietly in front of the sink, Kureha stares into the mirror and takes a moment to gather her thoughts in complete silence. She expresses her sheer disbelief over the situation, admitting to herself that she never actually expected to run into the other girl tonight. While touching up her makeup, she reflects on how she would love to actually sit down and have a real conversation with her, sometime especially about Takashi, noting that the other girl clearly seemed to have her own hidden agenda just like she does. She admits that she is absolutely dying to figure out what is going on inside the head of a girl who stubbornly refuses to take off her hood, deeply wanting to know the exact details of how she and Takashi managed to become such close friends. Despite her curiosity about his best friend, her thoughts quickly drift back to her own relationship, as she softly sighs over the fact that Takashi's sudden romantic sneak attacks always manage to catch her completely off guard. Her inner thoughts spiral into deep affection, confessing that she is intensely curious about every single detail concerning him and desperately wants to uncover more of his hidden sides, so she can keep him all to herself. Smiling warmly to herself, she mentally addresses Takashi, playfully noting that he probably has absolutely no idea just how incredibly obsessed she actually is with him. The scene suddenly shifts to a highly intimate moment in the bath, where a smiling Kureha presses closely against a heavily blushing Takashi from behind to wash his back, playfully asking how he is feeling while leaving him completely frozen in shock. A single drop of water drips quietly inside the bathroom as a highly romantic and tense moment begins to unfold between them. Looking up with a soft, blushing smile, she gently tells him to just stay completely still for her. Takashi is sweating bullets in his flustered state, helplessly muttering that he already knows. Giggling softly, she slowly reaches out to initiate her playful, warm contact. Standing behind him in the mirror, she happily gushes about how absolutely adorable he looks, leaving Takashi to deeply puzzle over how his simple punishment and hangover treatment somehow escalated into sharing an incredibly intimate bath with his senior. Flashing back to a little earlier in the living room, while Takashi is still miserably nursing a massive hangover, Kureha suddenly demands to know what his female best friend Yuu is actually like. When Takashi asks why she is bringing this up out of nowhere, she simply claims she is just a little curious, while Takashi internally marvels at how incredibly unfazed she is compared to his own miserable state after their heavy drinking last night. She leans in closer, demanding more details about Yuu, and asking if they are actually close friends. Takashi awkwardly explains that he wouldn't necessarily say they are close, and admits she is pretty much his only friend at university, which Kureha finds a little sad before he happily reassures her that Yuu is essentially just one of the guys to him, even mentioning that she recently helped him build his new bed. But the moment Kureha processes his casual remark about his bed, her smile instantly freezes in a sudden twitch of jealousy, prompting Takashi to suddenly realize he has made a massive blunder. Kureha zeroes in on Takashi's sudden slip-up with a dangerously knowing grin, making him instantly regret walking right into her trap. She immediately brings up the specific box hidden behind his bed, explicitly calling out his secret adult stash and forcing him to weakly confirm his ultimate embarrassment. She slyly asks if he and his friend Yuu put that entire collection together, leaving him in absolute panic as he internally screams over the terrible misunderstanding. Leaning in close, she cheerfully declares that his behavior deserves a proper punishment, leaving Takashi completely shocked and dreading what is about to come next. Placing his open adult magazine onto the table, she points directly to his favorite page and boldly promises to replicate the exact scenario step by step for him. She points out that since he lets other girls into his room behind her back, she needs to make absolutely sure he remembers exactly who belongs by his side. Takashi can only anxiously call out to his senior, desperately wondering what kind of wild scheme she has cooked up for him this time. Shifting back to the present moment, she enthusiastically offers to wash his back in the tub, prompting a highly flustered and shaky agreement from him. Takashi mentally grumbles about how her offer to let him choose the scenario was a total sham, especially after she completely took over the selection process by claiming he would only pick something too vanilla anyway. As she gently starts washing him in the warm bath, Takashi desperately questions why her supposed punishments always end up feeling like an incredible reward. A tense, highly suggestive silence fills the humid air as she begins their next intimate activity, instantly sending his heart rate soaring. Takashi's mind completely races as he struggles to process the sudden, incredibly close touch, completely overwhelmed by the intense heat of the moment. She playfully asks how he is liking her thorough care, thoroughly enjoying his helpless, highly flustered reaction, as she continues to dominate the situation. As she gently focuses on his back and sweetly asks if the sensation feels good, Takashi is left mentally screaming in total bliss, fully convinced that this highly affectionate treatment cannot possibly be classified as a punishment. When a heavily flustered Takashi meekly confesses that the treatment actually feels incredibly good, Kureha beams with pure joy, though he desperately tries to regain his composure and logically protest his own enjoyment. Realizing the physical contact is rapidly escalating to a whole new level, Takashi frantically stammers and questions if she is taking things a bit too far, his face burning bright red as he struggles to keep his sanity intact. Completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the temptation, Takashi desperately admits to himself that he is rapidly losing his mind and can no longer endure this sweet torture. Sensing his immense inner battle, Kureha teasingly asks if he is currently struggling to hold back his desires, prompting a defeated and frustrated groan of agreement from Takashi. Even though Takashi reminds himself that he must strictly endure this punishment, until the very end, Kureha completely derails his resolve by seductively asking what he would do if she simply decided to remove her towel next. Takashi gasps in sheer disbelief and frantically asks what on earth she is saying, but Kureha warmly praises him for being such a good boy and happily declares that his official punishment is finally over since he successfully endured it. Kureha suggestively whispers that it is finally okay to take things further, prompting Takashi to nervously confirm her permission as he steels himself to actually make a move. But before he can even act on his desires, Kureha completely flips the script by aggressively shoving him forward and pinning him flat against the bathroom wall. Caught completely off guard by her sudden intense escalation, Takashi frantically yells for her to stop, desperately pleading that they need to show at least a little bit of restraint right now. Looking back at her with complete sincerity, he earnestly explains that he is slamming on the brakes simply because he genuinely wants to treasure her and treat their relationship with the utmost care. Kureha softly thanks him for his consideration as Takashi openly lays bare his deepest insecurity, confessing that he is utterly terrified she might eventually get bored and leave him if they rush things. Hearing his heartfelt confession, Kureha admits that she also intentionally holds back to keep him hooked before sweetly asking if she can do just one last thing to him tonight. Completely melting his heart, she warmly wraps her arms around him from behind and softly thanks him for loving someone like her. The bathroom door clicks shut shortly after leaving a heavily blushing and utterly stunned Takashi sitting entirely alone as he tries to process her incredibly sweet ambush. The scene shifts to the living room where a fully dressed Kureha paces across the floor in her hoodie clutching her chest as she struggles to contain her own wildly racing heartbeat. Looking down at her phone, she sighs over her own stubbornness, quietly admitting to herself that even after all this time and intimacy, she still cannot bring herself to directly confess her true feelings out loud. Looking at her phone, Kureha admits to herself that she only wanted to make Takashi a little jealous to get a fun reaction out of him, but she accidentally let things get way out of hand. She sighs over her own complicated nature, acknowledging that she is such a handful while guessing that he probably hasn't even noticed the true depth of her playful schemes. Setting her phone aside, she decides that maybe it is actually for the best if he remains completely oblivious to her inner calculations. She reflects that her growing intensity isn't really about the physical kiss itself, but rather about the hidden message behind it. Her phone search reveals that a kiss on the neck symbolizes pure obsession, and while she is fine with him staying in the dark, a part of her desperately wants him to realize just how deeply consumed she is by him. Losing all restraint, they completely give in to their passion with Takashi, eagerly pleading for more as she warmly pulls him back in for another deep kiss. The scene transitions to a lively cafe where she meets up with his best friend for their planned chat. Kureha playfully leans across the table, excitedly offering Yuu a bite of her food and demanding she say ah to kick off their friendly hangout. At their cafe meetup, Yuu holds out a spoonful of dessert and playfully coos for Takashi to open wide, instantly catching him off guard. As they dig into the seasonal chestnut parfait, Yuu notes that Takashi looks like he is completely about to lose his mind, asking Kureha if she is really okay with this setup. Kureha happily giggles and reassures her that she actually loves him when he gets this flustered, leaving a sweating Yuu to seriously question her senior's unusual romantic preferences. Yuu decides to drop the issue since Kureha is comfortable with it, which prompts a highly dramatic outburst from Takashi, who furiously demands to know why he is being ignored when he is the one paying for the damn parfait. He then panics upon discovering the two girls have been texting only for them to reveal they casually swapped contact information back at the bar while he was too tipsy to notice. Takashi tries to get to the bottom of things, asking why exactly Kureha wanted the three of them to grab lunch together. When Kureha casually admits she simply wanted to catch up with Yuu, Takashi dryly complains that his presence is completely pointless, which Yuu ruthlessly confirms by stating she only came along to let him pay for their meal anyway. The playful bickering abruptly stops as Kureha falls into a heavy silent glare, leaving Takashi to break into a nervous sweat as he desperately tries to figure out what suddenly triggered his senior's intense possessiveness. Later that evening, the scene transitions to the quiet exterior of their apartment building as their chaotic lunch date finally comes to a close and they head back home. Back in the safety of their living room, Takashi nervously calls out to his senior, completely unsure of what kind of mood she is in after their long day. He is quickly answered when she suddenly climbs directly onto his lap on the couch, leaving him to sweat and demand an explanation for what is happening. Kureha calmly declares that it is finally time to spoil her boyfriend for all he is worth, leaving a highly flustered Takashi to desperately question why her idea of spoiling him involves sitting directly on him. Demanding a sweet chew high next, she eagerly instructs him to pass her a drink, which Takashi quickly does before watching her happily gulp down the sweet alcohol. Noting her rapidly rising intoxication, Takashi nervously calls out her name only to receive a highly playful and tipsy response that signals another chaotic evening is officially underway. Kureha wastes absolutely no time getting comfortable, cutely demanding that Takashi feed her the drink directly while she relaxes in his lap. Takashi can only panickingly question if she is actually serious about this ridiculous level of coddling. Kureha happily confirms that she is far too busy enjoying being held in his arms to hold her own, leaving a defeated Takashi to realize he has basically been demoted to a glorified piece of furniture. Since she refuses to wait another second and demands her beverage immediately, he finally gives in and carefully feeds her the drink, nervously warning her not to spill a single drop while she happily gulps it down. She eagerly chugs the strawberry alcohol, savoring every single sweet drop of the drink, as Takashi keeps the can steady for her. Licking her lips with immense satisfaction, Kureha happily declares that the sweet drink is exactly what she needed. Takashi can only offer a flustered, blushing response, secretly relieved that he managed to satisfy her demanding request without any major spills. Just as Takashi thinks the ordeal is over, Kureha immediately demands that he feed her some chocolate snacks next. When a baffled Takashi questions if he is seriously on snack duty too, she smugly reminds him that she already promised to go all out on spoiling him today. Takashi finds himself catering to her every whim, feeding her piece by piece, while nervously wondering if her unusually high level of clinginess means she secretly has something far more intimate planned for later. Takashi hesitantly asks if he is doing a decent job feeding her, but Kureha only giggles, teasingly noting that she feels like she is being tamed by his attentive treatment. Takashi can only sweat and grumble to himself, reminding her that she is the absolute mastermind who forced him into this ridiculous roleplay in the first place. Kureha leans in with a smug smirk, playfully suggesting that he must be secretly enjoying himself at least a little bit. And incredibly flustered, Takashi tries to find his words, nervously stammering that fun is definitely not the correct word to describe the sheer anxiety he is currently enduring. Takashi frantically clarifies that his intense focus is because he literally cannot let his guard down for a single second. This prompts Kureha to act entirely innocent, casually asking if her presence is truly that distracting, which only throws Takashi into an even deeper state of utter confusion. She immediately delivers a devastating direct blow to his sanity by whispering that her lap sitting position makes it impossible for him to ignore her lap, sending him into a complete choking panic. Kureha happily revels in his incredibly dramatic reaction, leaving Takashi to sit in completely silent, blushing defeat as she continues to thoroughly enjoy her victory. Turning the tables once again, Kureha playfully asks if he is starting to get thirsty too, smoothly offering him a direct sip from her own sweet drink. Faced with her tempting invitation, a heavily blushing Takashi finally decides to abandon his resistance and agrees to take a taste. Takashi takes another long gulp of his drink, resolving to do his absolute best to keep things exciting so Kureha never gets bored, while silently acknowledging that he cannot simply let her have her way all the time. Kureha eagerly asks if the drink is to his liking, prompting Takashi to admit that it is actually just a little too sweet for his taste. Determined to make her happy no matter what, Takashi gathers his resolve to confess his true desires to his senior, before suddenly catching himself and trying to back out of the tense moment. Gathering all his courage, Takashi looks directly at her and delivers a completely raw, unfiltered declaration of his love. Deeply touched by his directness, Kureha blushes warmly and immediately reciprocates his feelings, confessing that she loves him just as much. She softly calls out his name as they lean in close, completely losing themselves in the rapidly rising passion between them. The room fills with soft, breathless sighs as the two of them what is easily the deepest and most passionate kiss they have ever experienced together. Breaking the kiss for just a brief second to catch their breath, a completely dazed Takashi groggily calls out her name. Takashi passionately reaffirms his deep love for her, prompting a soft, knowing response from Kureha as she pulls him right back in and warmly declares her own affection. However, right as their physical connection reaches its absolute peak, she suddenly pauses, hinting at a quiet hesitation. Kureha smugly declares that she is still not entirely satisfied, leaving a completely drained Takashi to frantically wonder what else he needs to do to give her exactly what she wants. Shifting the mood, Kureha suddenly asks if he could try calling her by her given name for a change, completely catching him off guard. Takashi internally panics since he has never actually dropped her honorifics, before heavily hesitating as he admits just how incredibly embarrassing the whole idea feels. He awkwardly fumbles his words by mashing her name and title together, prompting a highly amused Kureha to gently push him to give it another shot. Blushing furiously and stammering through his intense shyness, Takashi finally manages to properly force out her first name. Hearing him say it completely melts Kureha's composure, and with a heavily flushed face, she immediately begs him to say it again. Takashi softly repeats her name to oblige, only for an eager Kureha to instantly demand that he keep saying it even more. The heavy romantic tension completely takes over as they hold each other tightly, fully surrendering to the highly intimate atmosphere between them. Emboldened by the moment, Takashi boldly uses her first name to declare that he wants to keep kissing her, earning a sweet and triumphant praise from Kureha for being such a good boy. With all hesitation finally gone, they immediately lean in and lose themselves in another incredibly deep and passionate kiss. An empty can of sweet strawberry chew high rolls quietly onto the floor, indicating that the alcohol has once again completely taken over their system. Wrapped up in a deep, highly passionate embrace, Takashi's desires completely take over as he silently vows to give his senior absolutely everything she is looking for, before she softly calls out his name to break the heavy silence. Out there, Kureha suddenly demands to know if he genuinely only sees Yuu as a friend. When a heavily flustered Takashi asks why they are bringing her up again, and if it really has to be right now, she firmly counters that she is asking precisely because of their current state of mind. Kureha's mind flashes back to her quiet interrogation at the cafe, where Yuu casually explained that Takashi is obviously just a friend she can rely on, noting they have been best friends since freshman year. When Kureha dryly pointed out that they must be exceptionally close to have let him into her room, Yuu could only awkwardly agree to the description. Returning to the present, Kureha happily thanks him and declares she feels way better now, eagerly promising to focus entirely on kissing him all night long without any distractions. A flustered Takashi immediately begs for mercy, frantically reminding her that he still has university classes to attend the next morning. She playfully challenges him to try and make her give in, teasingly whispering that she wouldn't actually mind if they ended up doing much more than just simple kissing tonight, which leaves a flustered Takashi completely frozen in shock. She aggressively takes the lead by sliding her hand down to touch his waist, leaving Takashi to jump back in a full-blown panic and scream in utter disbelief over her sudden boldness. Kureha bursts into loud, triumphant laughter over his hilariously extreme reaction, while a heavily sweating Takashi angrily yells back that, of course, he jumped after such an unexpected sneak attack. As the tense atmosphere settles back into a cozy quiet, she giggles softly to herself, more determined than ever to keep him completely all to herself. When Takashi pulls her in tightly, Kureha teasingly tells him there is no need to be so aggressive since she is not going anywhere anyway. Affectionately kissing him, she coos over how incredibly cute he is, leaving a highly flustered Takashi to stubbornly mutter that he simply likes what he likes. Kureha acts surprised and playfully questions him the moment he desperately admits that he just cannot hold himself back any longer. Takashi's inner thoughts completely spill over as he repeatedly declares his overwhelming love for her, while Kureha silently notes that his cool demeanor almost makes her hesitate to tease him, though she admits she absolutely loves it when he acts so incredibly needy for her attention. Pushed entirely to his limit, a heavily flushed Takashi bluntly confesses that his intense emotions are completely overflowing. Without giving her another second to prepare, he aggressively pulls her close in a sudden burst of passion, completely cutting off his usual formal honorifics. Seizing control of the highly charged atmosphere, she stares deeply into his eyes and firmly demands that he drop the formalities and call her by her actual name. When he nervously stammers out her given name, she warmly praises him for being such a good boy as their overwhelming emotions rapidly melt into pure, unfiltered desire. Flashing a deeply affectionate smile, she decides it is finally time to give him his long-awaited reward, while his mind spirals with the desperate need to get even closer to her. Wrapping her arms tightly around him on the couch, she sweetly declares her love for him and fiercely vows to completely consume his thoughts, so he never has a single second to think about anyone else ever again. Sitting alone in the quiet apartment as the evening clock ticks past 8, Takashi lets out a heavy sigh and wonders exactly how long it has been since his senior was last by his side. He recalls his sheer shock from earlier that morning when Kureha suddenly announced she was having a sleepover at Yua's house tonight. Left entirely to his own devices, he slumps over the table in utter boredom, having already finished his dinner and school assignments with absolutely nothing left to do. Reflecting on their cohabitation, he realizes that ever since they started living together, he has been eating proper meals every morning and night, a massive change from his old habit of constantly skipping food. He fondly admits that their D-life has already settled into a wonderfully comfortable and domestic routine. Lost in his thoughts, he quietly confesses to himself how much he truly misses his senior, already wishing with all his heart that they could simply stay together like this forever. He glares at his silent phone resting on the table, desperately wondering what exactly she is up to right now at her sleepover. Meanwhile, the focus shifts directly to Kureha, who finds herself happily settling in for the night in a cozy bed, her mind completely consumed by thoughts of waking up next to her boyfriend. Earlier that evening, Kureha excitedly raises a fresh can of beer to kick off the sleepover, enthusiastically cheering for Yuu to join her, and promising that the two of them are going to have an absolute blast tonight. Sitting across the table, Yuu can only offer a highly hesitant and awkward agreement, letting out a deeply exhausted sigh as she prepares herself for her senior's overwhelming energy. Yuu immediately gets straight to the point, asking what exactly is going on with Kureha today, and directly inquiring if something dramatic happened between her and Takashi. Kureha simply blinks and sweetly explains that she only came over because she genuinely wants to get much closer to Yuu, prompting a surprised but earnest response from her host, who admits she wants to get to know more about her senior too. Yuu quietly claims that there is absolutely nothing interesting about her, suggesting that Kureha would have way more fun teasing Takashi instead. However, Kureha smoothly counters that she simply cannot bring herself to leave Yuu alone. Kureha explains that while she obviously loves teasing Takashi, she is just as intensely curious about Yuu herself. This sudden focus catches Yuu completely off guard, prompting her to nervously ask if this intense interest is actually just about the hood she refuses to take off. Sensing Yuu's defensive stance, Kureha gently questions if Yuu genuinely believes she is just being viewed as pitiful or merely amusing. The direct question leaves Yuu momentarily stunned and questioning if that is truly all there is to Kureha's curiosity. Kureha warmly reassures Yuu that she has absolutely no intention of forcing any secrets out of her, declaring that she never wants to do anything Yuu would hate. She softly explains that her motivations are completely simple, stemming purely from a genuine desire to get to know her better. Yuu is left completely speechless by Kureha's unexpected warmth and sincerity, silently processing the fact that she isn't being judged or mocked. Yuu quietly admits that she really doesn't want to receive any kind of special treatment. Kureha simply smiles and reassures her that it is perfectly fine, firmly declaring that nothing Yuu says is going to change her positive opinion of her anyway. Yuu is completely overwhelmed by the older girl's overwhelming kindness, finding herself entirely unable to offer a response as her heart races. Finally, letting down her guard, Yuu decides that if she is sharing with Kureha, she is willing to take the leap. Taking a deep breath, Yuu finally reveals her true appearance, leaving Kureha to stare in silent awe at her gorgeous silky hair. Kureha instantly gasps in pure amazement, completely mesmerized by how incredibly silky Yuu's hair is and eagerly begging for permission to feel it. When a flustered Yuu shyly agrees, Kureha lets out a highly jealous whine, dramatically complaining that her own hair is way too stiff and a massive pain to manage in comparison. Yuu hesitantly asks if Kureha thinks her white hair looks weird, prompting Kureha to look back and simply ask why she would even think that. Yuu explains that people often tell her she does not look Japanese, but Kureha quickly dismisses the worry by pointing out her own red hair, making Yuu realize they are actually in the exact same boat. Yuu solemnly admits that she had to deal with those kinds of comments all the way through her high school graduation. Kureha warmly thanks her for sharing her past, before playfully declaring that she has the perfect plan to get Yuu to open up even more. Kureha suddenly drops a massive stash of tall beer cans onto the table, enthusiastically declaring that they definitely need to drink and let loose. Yuu is left completely shocked, frantically asking how on earth her senior managed to carry all of that alcohol by herself. Completely ignoring the question, Kureha cheerfully urges her to just drink up and enjoy the night, leaving a slightly overwhelmed Yuu to nervously agree as they clink their cans together. After taking a sip, Kureha lets out a dramatic sigh and admits that she is actually a little bit worried. When a confused Yuu asks what she means, Kureha bluntly states that it is simply because Yuu is incredibly cute. Kureha teasingly wonders out loud what she would do if Takashi actually ended up falling for Yuu, instantly throwing her junior into a massive panic. Yuu frantically begs her to stop making such ridiculous jokes, though she awkwardly mumbles that it is not completely impossible for him to fall for another girl. Yuu firmly shuts down the crazy idea, confidently declaring that she will absolutely never be anything more than a best friend to Takashi, which prompts Kureha to dramatically wail in playful relief. Meanwhile, back at his place, Takashi is casually enjoying a drink when his phone suddenly goes off, making him jump in a panic, as he realizes his senior is calling him completely out of the blue. Takashi answers the video call only to find a highly cheerful Kureha loudly declaring it a special love call, but he is immediately left in absolute shock when he spots his best friend Yuu sitting right beside her. The video call takes a wild turn when Yuu finally pulls down her hood, prompting a completely baffled Kureha to ask who she even is. Blushing furiously, Yuu snaps back that it is obviously her, leaving Takashi completely shocked that she finally showed her face on camera. As Kureha panics, Yuu casually drops the bombshell that Kureha did all sorts of questionable things to her, leaving everyone in a total state of confusion. Trying to steer the conversation back to normal, Kureha warmly asks Takashi if he managed to eat a proper dinner tonight. He happily replies that he did indeed make himself some hamburger steak, feeling glad to report his healthy meal. Seeing her genuine concern for his well-being makes Takashi blush, warmly, silently thinking about how deeply she truly cares for him. Kureha beams with relief at his response, and Takashi gratefully acknowledges that his daily eating habits have completely turned around for the better thanks to his caring senior. But the peace is short-lived when Takashi notices her holding a can and asks if she is casually drinking alcohol again. Kureha quickly tries to laugh it off, claiming it is only her very first bottle of the day, but a highly skeptical Yuu immediately interrupts to call out her blatant lie. Yuu aggressively hijacks the camera to show Takashi the absolute disaster zone of empty beer cans and messy snacks scattered all over, ignoring Kureha's frantic screams of protest as she exposes the truth. To make matters worse, Yuu bluntly reveals that Kureha hasn't even touched a single bite of real dinner yet, prompting Takashi to freeze in complete speechless disbelief. A dark dread washes over Takashi as he suddenly realizes that his senior's eating habits are probably completely and utterly sloppy the second he is not around to monitor her. Refusing to let her get away with it, Yuu declares that she is going to drag Kureha straight to the kitchen and force-feed her a proper meal, prompting a highly amused Takashi to cheer her on, as Kureha helplessly whines in the background. Kureha miserably groans about her ruined plans of lazing around with booze and snacks, as Yuu drags her away to cook, leaving Takashi to watch the chaotic duo on his screen with a mixture of worry and utter amusement. Seeing her usually dominant senior get so incredibly deflated and flustered brings a small, happy smile to Yuu's face. However, she quickly breaks up the cozy atmosphere by bluntly reminding them that while she doesn't mind their constant flirting, they are still technically inside her room. This sudden dose of reality immediately sends Kureha into a flurry of embarrassed, apologetic bows. Yuu turns around to ask her senior what exactly she has been doing behind her back this entire time, calling her out for making so much rustling noise in the kitchen. Kureha only offers a highly playful, innocent hum in response, acting completely oblivious to any suspicious activity. Takashi watches the video call while taking a drink, only to be completely blindsided when Kureha casually explains her bizarre logic that the ultimate essential attire for any proper cooking session is obviously a naked apron. The absurd suggestion instantly sends Takashi into a coughing fit as he gasps in utter disbelief over the sheer boldness of her sudden suggestion. An elaborate fantasy of his senior in a frilly naked apron immediately flashes through Takashi's mind, completely shattering his remaining sanity. Yuu instantly calls him out for being a massive pervert as he leans way too close to his phone screen, forcing a red-faced Takashi to frantically claim he only wanted to watch her cook. While Yuu firmly demands that Kureha put some actual clothes on, a highly amused Kureha lazily sighs, teasingly claiming that she was totally fine with the idea anyway. Brushing off the chaotic moment, Kureha cheerfully announces that she is just going to quickly whip up a meal using whatever ingredients she can find inside Yuu's fridge. As she starts chopping vegetables, Yuu watches in admiration and notes that her senior seems incredibly skilled and used to working in the kitchen. Kureha happily explains that she got plenty of rigorous training from her mother back when she still lived at her parents' house. Takashi watches her from the screen, deeply impressed by how remarkably steady her hands remain on the knife, even though she has had quite a lot to drink tonight. Watching her cook fills Takashi with a warm wave of deep affection as he reflects on how seeing her back in the kitchen and hearing those cozy kitchen sounds have quickly become an essential part of his daily routine. He tenderly admits to himself that he can no longer imagine a life without this incredibly beloved sight. Staring happily at his phone screen, Takashi lets his thoughts wander to the future, warmly realizing that if he eventually gets married to her, every single day of his life will probably be filled with absolute happiness. The scene shifts, highlighting a tense flashback where a pair of chopsticks clatters onto the table as Kiriha stares forward with wide, stunned eyes. A sudden voice calls out to Takashi, snapping him out of his intense daze. Yu stares at him in sheer confusion while a highly nervous Kiriha gently stammers and asks what is suddenly wrong with him. Back in the present, Takashi sits alone on his couch during a video call, letting out a confused noise before freezing in absolute shock as he realizes he might have just said something completely outrageous out loud. On the other side of the call, a furiously blushing Kiriha screams the word marriage, completely panicking as she wonders if she actually just blurted her own secret thoughts out for him to hear. Takashi desperately tries to salvage the chaotic situation by reminding her that she constantly says similar things, bringing up a past memory where she casually suggested they get married while drinking. He frantically stammers that they both just get caught up in the moment sometimes, while internally marveling at how incredibly captivating she looks when she gets this flustered. Blushing heavily, Takashi completely loses his breath, entirely amazed by this rare, vulnerable side of her that perfectly contrasts her usual composed and confident self. He quietly watches in awe as she continues to shyly look away on his phone screen. His heart completely melts as he softly admits to himself that she is simply too adorable for words. Unable to hold back his racing feelings any longer, he eagerly reaches out to grab his phone and close the distance between them. Kiriha intensely confesses that she is actually thinking pretty seriously about marriage, leaving Takashi heavily blushing at her bold and unexpected declaration. The immense weight of her own bold words instantly catches up to her, causing Kiriha to completely short-circuit with swirly eyes and a flustered groan. Realizing his presence on the video call is making his senior completely useless, Takashi decides to hang up for everyone's safety, especially after Yu bluntly points out that a highly distracted Kiriha just made the classic mistake of mixing up the sugar and salt. Before disconnecting, Takashi gently reassures a heavily blushing Kiriha that she can totally take her time and think about the marriage topic later. He softly reminds her that such a massive step is definitely not something they need to rush into right now, earning a quiet gasp of surprise from her. Yu calmly accepts his apology for being dragged into their chaotic romantic display, while Kiriha quickly calls out to Takashi one last time before he leaves. Sharing a warm and highly affectionate moment, the two of them happily bid each other good night and promise to see one another tomorrow. Holding his phone after ending the call, Takashi mentally notes that his senior doesn't need to give him an immediate answer right away. He silently resolves to himself that someday, when the time is absolutely right, he will properly tell her his true feelings. Meanwhile, back at the sleepover, Kiriha wildly thrashes around under the covers in pure joy over the marriage talk, forcing an exhausted Yu to desperately beg her senior to quiet down and go to sleep. Kiriha stands by the door holding a container of food and deeply apologizes to Yu for causing so much chaotic trouble the night before, promising to make it up to her next time. Yu casually brushes it off, saying she messes up her own cooking all the time anyway, but Kiriha insists that she absolutely has to take responsibility and clean up her own messes. Yu sighs and gives in, conceding that she won't stop her senior if she is truly that set on it. After a moment of heavy silence, Kiriha suddenly calls out to her with a deeply conflicted expression. With a heavily burning face, Kiriha miserably wonders out loud how on earth she is supposed to look Takashi in the eye after everything that happened, leaving a completely baffled Yu to just blink in utter confusion. Yu bluntly advises her to just act completely normal like she always does, but Kiriha frantically protests that it is way easier said than done. Recalling all of her messy cooking blunders and the incredibly embarrassing, uncool side of herself she exposed the night before, she groans that she simply feels too miserable to function. Yu can only offer a dry, straightforward agreement to her senior's dramatic complaints. Reflecting on their intense connection, Kureha admits to herself that she completely panicked because she hasn't seen Takashi look so incredibly serious and passionate in such a long time. She quietly confesses that even though she genuinely believed she was fully prepared for their relationship to advance, his raw intensity totally caught her off guard. Yu points out the obvious, reminding her that they are still just young college students, so there is no need to stress about being perfectly prepared. However, as Kureha continues to ramble about desperately wanting to be the mature one who can handle whatever Takashi throws her way, Yu's eyes widen in sudden realization, as she asks if her senior is actually genuinely serious about taking things all the way with him. Kureha confidently declares that she really wouldn't mind marrying Takashi, a sudden heavy confession that leaves Yu staring back in completely stunned silence. Yu quietly mutters to herself that it is no wonder she lost, quickly brushing off her own slip of the tongue, before changing the subject to mention that it has been a very long time since she last saw Takashi with such a serious expression. This piece of information immediately piques Kureha's interest, prompting her to ask when exactly Yu had seen him look so incredibly serious in the past, as she blushes warmly. Meanwhile, back in his own kitchen, Takashi is completely losing his mind in a fit of pure embarrassment, frantically screaming to himself over the absolute insanity of what he blurted out to his senior the day before. While trying to focus on cooking, he desperately tells himself that the alcohol must have been doing all the talking, even if he did genuinely want to confess his feelings, eventually feeling incredibly mortified about admitting just how terribly lonely he was without her. He admits to himself that while he is dying to hear her response and wants to get even closer to his senior, there is absolutely no point in getting ahead of himself and trying to tie her down too quickly. Resolving that he loves her exactly the way she is, his quiet train of thought is suddenly cut short when the front door clicks open and Kureha cheerfully announces her return. She proudly presents a spectacular, beautifully prepared meal that looks absolutely mouth-watering and practically sparkles on the plate. But before he can even praise her culinary skills, Kureha looks down with a highly serious, determined expression and boldly declares that she wants to make Takashi her wife. A completely flustered Takashi tries to apologize for his sudden confession from yesterday, but he is immediately thrown off when he has to ask if she just completely mixed up their genders, though an excited Kureha completely ignores his confusion and proudly urges him to just focus on her delicious masterpiece. Kureha dramatically cries over the massive difference between Yu's amazing French toast and her own burnt brown failure of a dish, loudly declaring that Yu should obviously be the real wife here, though Takashi instantly and flatly shuts the ridiculous idea down. Takashi desperately urges his senior to pull herself together, reminding her of their respective roles in the relationship. A heavily blushing Kureha immediately begs him to forget everything she just said, but Takashi firmly states that forgetting such a chaotic moment is completely impossible. Takashi casually adds that she looked incredibly cute, even while she was flustered, prompting Kureha to teasingly ask if that implies she is normally cute as well. Without missing a beat, Takashi completely disarms her by genuinely confirming that was exactly what he meant. Kureha's eyes widen in sheer silent shock as his incredibly straightforward and earnest compliment completely catches her off guard. Staring back at him, Kureha mentally reflects on his pure and earnest eyes, flashing back to the exact moment he bravely stepped in to save her at a past drinking party. She remembers how he looked when he completely blurted out his heartfelt confession, to her internally admitting that those are the exact eyes she fell deeply in love with. As Takashi quietly calls out her name, she fully realizes just how completely obsessed she is with making him fall even harder for her. Breaking the heavy silence, Takashi points directly to her burnt dish and asks if he can eat it. Kureha quickly warns him that it probably tastes terrible since she messed it up and offers to make something new, but Takashi earnestly insists that it is perfectly fine because he simply wants to eat her cooking. Kureha pouts and mutters that she is still not entirely okay with serving him a failure, but eventually gives in while warning him not to complain if it tastes awful. Takashi simply smiles and smoothly declares that he will happily love every single bite, completely accepting even her culinary mistakes. Takashi happily takes a bite and immediately declares that it tastes good, while a deeply moved Kuraha softly reflects on how he constantly chooses to stay right by her side even when she completely messes things up. As they sit peacefully together at the table, Kuraha's heart completely melts with the warm realization that Takashi wholeheartedly accepts and loves her for exactly who she is, even when she falls incredibly short of being the perfect senior. Takashi looks at his senior warmly and asks if she wants to have a drink with him right now. Kuraha immediately calls him out, pointing out that it is not even noon yet and warning him that he is getting ahead of himself even if they do not have classes today. Takashi weakly complains that he can't help it because yesterday's drinking session was absolutely no fun at all, completely catching her off guard. When Kuraha realizes that some of her alcohol stash is missing, Takashi sheepishly apologizes, confessing that he got lonely and simply couldn't help himself. A flustered Kuraha mutters that he should have just asked her to come home early, but Takashi admits he didn't want to ruin her fun at the sleepover. Kuraha playfully counters that he seemed completely fine with blurting out a marriage proposal, despite worrying so much about being a burden, leaving Takashi utterly speechless. Takashi shyly defends himself, explaining that she was just so incredibly cute in that moment, and his desire for their life together to last forever simply slipped out. Wanting to get to the bottom of his sudden request, she playfully demands to know why exactly he wanted to start drinking right now. Takashi is far too embarrassed to speak clearly, mumbling incoherent words that leave a highly amused Kuraha asking him to speak up. Kuraha completely decodes his secret plan, asking if he wanted to get drunk just to use the alcohol as an excuse to cuddle. When a defeated Takashi weakly admits she is right, Kuraha bursts into cheerful laughter, teasing him for being sneaky and reassuring him that he never needs an excuse because she is always completely down. She delivers a devastating blow to his heart by warmly reminding him that there is absolutely no need to hesitate, since they are going to get married eventually anyway. Takashi is left completely stunned and deeply touched, realizing with absolute joy that his senior was actually thinking the exact same thing about their future. But the romantic atmosphere is immediately shattered as Kuraha happily cracks open her daytime beverage, loudly declaring that drinking in the middle of the day hits totally different. Mamaji teases Takashi, playfully pointing out that he is completely into drinking now since he is already working on his second can. She cutely notes how much she loves that today is the day Takashi actually invited her to have a drink together. Mamaji smugly notes that Takashi's palate is finally getting used to alcohol, prompting a highly blushing Takashi to sweetly admit that it is only because drinking with his senior is always so much fun. Touched by his sweet comment, Mamaji warmly coos at him and immediately offers to get him a refill. Sensing an opportunity to tease him further, Mamaji cozies up even closer and boldly asks if he would rather cuddle instead, sending a panicking Takashi into an absolute meltdown as he desperately yells that this level of closeness definitely shouldn't count. Takashi frantically tries to change the subject by begging for his refill, which she casually agrees to pass him. However, Mamaji immediately circles back to her favorite topic, teasingly asking where they left off regarding his secret desire to cuddle more, forcing a highly flustered Takashi to stutteringly claim that, while he doesn't necessarily dislike the idea, she has completely got his intentions all wrong. Takashi desperately tries to maintain his boundaries, insisting that those kinds of intimate steps should be taken much more carefully. Mamaji softly counters by bringing up his incredibly passionate and bold declarations from yesterday, completely cornering him and leaving Takashi to let out a defeated blushing groan, as he realizes he has absolutely no logical defense left. Unable to resist her tempting closeness any longer, Takashi suddenly acts on his feelings and firmly interlocks his fingers with hers, prompting a surprised, happy little gasp from Mamaji, as she softly giggles at his sudden boldness. With their fingers warmly intertwined, Mamaji looks up with a deeply affectionate smile and softly suggests that they should finally talk about their future together today, happily declaring that they should keep the alcohol flowing a bit more to celebrate the intimate moment. Holding her drink close, Mamaji locks eyes with him with a deeply loving gaze, warmly reminding him that since they have each other, they have all the time in the world to slowly build their life together. Takashi beams with absolute happiness as the romantic atmosphere reaches its peak, But the tender moment is instantly shattered when the doorbell suddenly rings, leaving both of them frozen in a state of utter dumbfounded shock. As the doorbell suddenly rings and completely ruins their romantic momentum, an annoyed Kureha heavily sighs about the terrible timing while a flustered Takashi quickly volunteers to go see who is visiting. Takashi quickly jogs over to the entrance, casually calling out to ask who is at the door as he reaches to unlock it. Takashi completely freezes in absolute terror as he opens the door to find a highly intimidating, sharp-eyed older man glaring down at him, aggressively declaring that he has come to take his daughter back. The terrifying man aggressively demands that Momoji Otani be brought to him, immediately leaving a completely bewildered Takashi to let out a panicked squeak as the imposing figure furiously yells at him to stop standing around and hurry up. Takashi frantically scrambles back inside while Kureha casually asks what is wrong from the living room, teasingly guessing that he accidentally ordered a dirty magazine and jokingly reminding him to use a convenience store pickup next time. A completely panicked, Takashi desperately yells out to his senior, screaming that the current situation is actually way worse than an embarrassing delivery. The intense, terrifying tension completely fills the air as Takashi desperately forces his words out to finish his frantic warning. Takashi urgently screams that her dad is standing right outside the door, leaving a completely blindsided Kureha to freeze in utter shock as she lets out a confused gasp. Stepping into the hallway, Kureha nervously stammers out a hesitant greeting to her father, leaving a heavily sweating Takashi to stand awkwardly by the door as the suffocating family reunion officially begins. The peaceful atmosphere is completely shattered when Kureha's father suddenly appears, shocking her as she demands to know what he is doing there. The older man sternly replies that he only showed up because she never gives him a proper reply. Her father immediately launches into a lecture complaining that he has told her 1,000 times to at least keep in touch no matter how busy she gets. Kureha angrily fires back that she does keep in touch specifically with her mother. Her father argues that she was supposed to contact him as well, not just her mother, but Kureha snaps back that telling them both is completely redundant and a waste of time. Her father points out that she used to update them when she first started university, prompting Kureha to complain that he is constantly nagging and overanalyzing everything. A completely stunned father can only repeat her words in disbelief, as Takashi stands awkwardly between them, feeling totally exhausted by the sudden family drama. Takashi finally gathers the courage to step in, frantically begging them both to calm down and take a quick breather before things escalate any further. Seeing Kureha look so frustrated, Takashi mentally notes that it has been a very long time since he last saw his senior get this emotional and genuinely angry. Trying to play the peacemaker, Takashi awkwardly suggests they all sit down inside to have a proper chat, mistakenly calling her father dad in his extreme nervousness. This triggers a terrifying glare from Kureha's father, who coldly states there is absolutely no reason for him to be calling him dad, leaving Takashi to let out a terrified eep. When a shaking Takashi asks how he should address him instead, the older man bluntly replies that Kotaro is perfectly fine. Realizing her father is even more intimidating than Kureha originally described, Takashi watches as she politely offers to brew some tea and invites Kotaro inside, receiving a quiet thank you in return. Just as Takashi is trying to process the incredibly tense atmosphere, he notices Kureha quietly checking her phone and asks what on earth she is doing. Kureha casually explains that she is simply handling a minor cleaning request, quickly telling a sweating Takashi not to worry at all and sweetly reassuring him that there is absolutely nothing for him to stress about. With the tea finally prepared and served, the group prepares to sit down and begin their incredibly tense family discussion. Kureha's father firmly declares that his mind is completely made up, dropping the massive bombshell that he is taking his daughter back home with him. While a sweating Takashi internally panics over who gave the older man permission to make such a bold call, a defiant Kureha firmly snaps back that she has absolutely no intention of returning home. The father bluntly reveals that Kureha's mother actually gave the permission by going behind his back, making Takashi realize exactly where his senior gets her free-spirited nature from. The older man then turns to Takashi, sympathetically asking if Kureha is dragging him along for a wild ride, since she is such a massive handful. Takashi immediately jumps to her defense, earnestly declaring that he doesn't consider Kureha to be a nuisance or a handful in the slightest, leaving his senior blushing heavily at his sweet words. As Takashi continues his heartfelt speech about how she definitely keeps him on his toes without ever being a burden, he is suddenly cut off by a sharp twitch when a hand sneakily reaches out to grab him. Hidden completely out of sight under the table, a highly smug and heavily blushing Kiriha tightly squeezes his hand, letting out a highly mischievous giggle. Takashi mentally panics over her wildly inappropriate timing since they are right in the middle of a serious conversation with her dad. But Kiriha simply smiles and smoothly whispers that it is completely fine as long as they keep it a secret. As their fingers deeply intertwine under the table, Takashi frantically wonders what she means by keeping it secret, while she softly reassures him that she just desperately wants to hold on to him for a little bit. The father immediately picks up on the highly suspicious vibe and demands to know what on earth they are doing, causing a heavily sweating Takashi to completely panic and deny everything. The older man dramatically sulks, dryly noting that Takashi's extreme panic actually hurts his feelings, forcing the younger boy to awkwardly apologize. Watching the older man's dramatic shift in mood, Takashi silently realizes that he acts exactly like his senior, deeply confirming that the two of them are undoubtedly father and daughter. The older man then suddenly breaks the tension by politely asking if he can make himself completely comfortable, leaving a confused Takashi to wonder what is coming next. The door flies open to reveal Momoji's furious father Kotaro, who loudly bellows at the young couple for holding hands right in the middle of what was supposed to be a highly serious family discussion. Takashi is instantly frozen in sheer terror under his future father-in-law's intense glare. When Kotaro furiously demands to know what on earth they think they are doing, Momoji bluntly and calmly replies that they are obviously just flirting. Her total lack of concern only makes her father even more ballistic, as he angrily bellows about how he has always warned her to be incredibly cautious and restrained in her relationships. Momoji smugly argues that she gave the decision a massive amount of careful thought before she actually committed to dating Takashi, but Kotaro aggressively commands them to get away from each other, frantically asking how clinging to each other like glue qualifies as being cautious. As her father physically tries to pull Takashi away, Momoji stubbornly pulls back, demanding to know what is so wrong with their closeness, while a helpless Takashi can only scream in absolute despair over being treated like a human wishbone. Momoji glares at her father with a stubborn pout, tightening her grip on Takashi as she fiercely refuses to back down or let him go. Deciding to escalate the situation, Momoji boldly suggests that since they are already being lectured, they might as well show her father exactly how deeply they love each other. Takashi can only gasp in utter shock at her sudden provocation, while Kotaro looks on in complete horror, frantically yelling at them to absolutely not do anything indecent right out in the open. While a sweating Takashi desperately begs Momoji in his mind to stop pouring fuel on the fire, Kotaro continues his furious lecture, reminding them that they are still just university students who need to think things through far more carefully. However, his passionate scolding is suddenly interrupted by his phone loudly ringing. Kotaro is visibly startled by the call, grumbling about who could possibly be calling him at such an intense moment. Checking his screen, his aggressive posture instantly vanishes as he nervously answers the call, stammering out a greeting and asking his wife Haruka what is wrong. Kotaro flinches repeatedly in pure panic, desperately stammering that he is not annoyed by her call and insisting he would never dream of thinking such a terrible thing. Watching from the sidelines, a sweating Takashi can only wonder what on earth is happening as the terrifying, overprotective father suddenly transforms into a completely flustered mess. While her father desperately tries to explain to his wife on the phone that he is currently having an extremely important discussion with Momoji, Momoji simply leans in with a smug smirk and whispers to Takashi that her mom is incredibly amazing. As Takashi reels in shock from learning about Momoji's powerful mother, Kotaro completely breaks down on the phone, desperately begging his wife not to be angry and tearfully crying about what he is supposed to do if she ends up hating him. Seeing the fearsome patriarch completely whipped and reduced to a pathetic weeping mess, Takashi can only watch in deep pity, feeling a little bit bad for even witnessing such an ultimate defeat. Kiriha playfully demands Takashi's full attention, telling him not to focus entirely on her father and asking him to pay some attention to her instead. Kotaro groans as he checks his phone, realizing he has a pressing matter to tend to, and will have to find another time to have a proper discussion with Kiriha. When Kiriha stubbornly declares she has nothing to say to him anyway, her father sighs that she is acting like a child again. Her father points out her daytime drinking and lectures her to start acting like a proper legal adult. Kiriha stubbornly retorts that she is plenty grown up, even if he refuses to admit it, leaving a sweating Takashi to quietly call out to her in embarrassment. Her father announces he is heading home for the day but firmly warns her they are going to have a proper serious discussion soon. Kiriha only huffs in response, stubbornly refusing to look at him. On his way out, her father suddenly warns Takashi to be ready to move back, and strictly orders him not to do anything funny with Kiriha. Backing up his warning with an incredibly intimidating glare, he demands that they keep their relationship completely respectable and well-behaved, prompting a terrified and shaking Takashi to frantically agree. With a final polite sign-off, Kiriha's father exits the apartment, leaving the room in a heavy, silent lull. Kiriha softly apologizes for her father showing up so suddenly and tells Takashi not to let her father's harsh words get to him, though a thoughtful Takashi reassures her that he is perfectly fine. Takashi quietly watches Kiriha as she stands in silent contemplation, deeply questioning if it is truly okay for her and her father to remain so emotionally distant from one another. Takashi resolves to himself that he desperately wants his senior to clear the air and mend her relationship with her father. He realizes that in order to make that dream a reality, he will have to take action himself. He firmly decides that he must work hard to become a truly respectable man whom Kotaro can genuinely approve of as a partner for Kiriha. The scene opens on the quiet exterior of their apartment building as the morning birds happily chirp outside. Inside the room, an annoyed Kiriha quietly stews over her father's harsh demand for them to maintain a respectable relationship, crossing her arms in deep thought, while Takashi remains completely passed out in the background. Her quiet frustration quickly boils over into full-blown irritation, as she mentally complains about her father acting like he understands everything despite not knowing a single thing about Takashi or their genuine bond. Her anger quickly softens into a melancholic sigh as she silently admits that she doesn't actually want to shut her dad out of her life, desperately wishing he would just make an effort to understand her feelings. Whining that she just wants to flirt with her boyfriend in peace without any sudden interruptions, she checks the calendar on her phone and happily notes that they have a long weekend ahead, instantly formulating the perfect escape plan. Later on, a sleepy Takashi groggily sits up in bed and mumbles his morning greetings, only to instantly jolt awake in complete surprise when loud clattering noises echo through the room just as his senior eagerly calls out his name. He is left entirely bewildered when Kiriha suddenly slides the door open with a suitcase already in hand, cheerfully asking if he wants to drop everything and go on a spontaneous overnight trip right this second. Kiriha enthusiastically urges him to get moving since she is already completely packed, leading a baffled Takashi to complain that she didn't even wait for his answer, though she smugly notes she knew he would agree anyway, forcing him to sheepishly admit she is absolutely right. Flashing an incredibly sweet and affectionate smile, Kiriha happily praises his reliability and warmly declares her deep love for him, delivering a massive critical hit directly to his heart that leaves him heavily blushing and gulping in nervous excitement. As they set their impromptu travel plans, Takashi silently feels completely relieved to see her back in such high spirits after the stressful family encounter, easily going along with her casual suggestion to head down to Izu for their sudden getaway. Kiriha leans in close to a heavily flustered Takashi, seductively whispering that the hot springs are eagerly waiting for them. Takashi's mind instantly goes to the gutter, conjuring up a steamy vision of Kiriha wrapped only in a towel at the hot springs, as she continues to whisper sweet temptations into his ear. Catching his highly flustered reaction, Kiriha smugly giggles and directly calls him out for obviously thinking about something dirty, making Takashi jump in a complete panic. Flashing a highly mischievous smile, Kiriha playfully tells him that he will just have to wait until they arrive to see what happens, while Takashi's inner monologue admits he had absolutely no way of knowing what was coming next. A cheerful Kiriha eagerly urges him to finish packing so they can head straight out to Izu, while Takashi reflects on how this particular trip together would turn out, with the scene shifting to their packed suitcase as they officially kick off their highly anticipated romantic getaway. The couple's trip officially begins with Kureha happily enjoying a delicious bento box on the train, keeping the romantic mood incredibly high as they continue to flirt even while traveling. Taking in the gorgeous coastal scenery, Kureha stretches her arms out with a satisfied hum as they finally arrive at their scenic destination. Kureha happily exclaims how fresh the mountain air tastes, while Takashi is still in complete awe that they actually traveled all the way out to Izu together. When Kureha asks if he is nervous, Takashi nervously admits that he is. She surprises him by admitting that she is feeling nervous too, which leaves Takashi completely shocked since she seems completely calm and collected on the outside. Takashi quietly reflects on their sudden trip, guessing it must have something to do with her massive fight with her father the day before. He firmly resolves that he will do everything he can to support his senior and avoid being a burden during their time together. Kureha snaps him out of his thoughts by asking what he is daydreaming about, which Takashi quickly tries to laugh off. She teasingly guesses that he must be thinking about the hot springs, reminding him how incredibly excited he seemed about them before they left. Takashi is immediately sent into a daze as a highly suggestive fantasy of his senior in the hot springs flashes through his mind. However, her father's terrifying warning to keep things respectable quickly plays in his head, prompting a highly panicked Takashi to tell himself that this is absolutely no time for such thoughts. Seeing her look so genuinely happy brings a wave of relief over Takashi. Kureha giggles warmly and teasingly tells him how much she loves how incredibly easy he is to read. After they drop off their bags, Kureha excitedly suggests doing some sightseeing, which Takashi happily agrees to. He quietly resolves that all he can do right now is stay by her side and support her until she is finally ready to face her father. With his mind fully set on protecting her, Takashi proudly vows to completely seal away all of his own personal desires for the duration of the trip as they happily set off together. As they walk, Kureha excitedly points out a beautiful structure, loudly calling out to Takashi that they have arrived at Koinaka Shrine. Staring in complete awe, Kureha gushes over the bright pink Torii gate, happily noting that the shrine definitely lives up to its reputation as a major romance hotspot. At a shrine, Takashi admits he is a little surprised that his senior is so interested in visiting a famous romance hotspot. Momiji softly defends her choice, claiming even she feels the urge to pray to the gods sometimes, before happily declaring that this particular spot is absolutely perfect for the two of them, and telling him to look at the sign nearby. Reading the wooden plaque, Takashi learns that Koinaka Shrine is a romance hotspot specifically meant for praying that a couple's dreamlike happiness lasts forever, leaving him deeply touched as he repeats the sweet promise to himself. Takashi warmly realizes that the shrine isn't merely about finding new love, but about preserving what they already have, which sets his heart racing. Momiji quietly giggles at his sweet reaction and tightly squeezes his hand, teasingly whispering that he really is incredibly easy to read. Staring at her soft, smiling face, Takashi quietly calls out her name as his heart completely overflows with a deep wave of emotion. He silently admits to himself that he can no longer imagine his life without her by his side. Losing himself in her beautiful glittering eyes, Takashi is consumed by a fierce protective desire, desperately resolving that he never wants to lose these precious happy days together. Sensing his intense gaze, Momiji softly asks what is wrong, while Takashi's heart beats wildly in his chest as he struggles to contain his rapidly rising passion. An overwhelming urge to kiss her right then and there completely takes over his thoughts, forcing Takashi to let out a quiet groan as he desperately tries to order himself to hold back and maintain his composure in public. Takashi reminds himself that he must be respectful and considerate of her feelings and everything she has been going through lately, but the sheer strength of his desire makes it almost impossible to stop himself. Before he can make a move or say a single word, Momiji gently silences him in an instant, capturing his complete, undivided attention. When a flustered Takashi asks what she is doing, Momiji shyly giggles and apologizes, sweetly confessing that she simply got caught up in the romantic moment herself. She teasingly notes that with the two of them together, everything around them suddenly feels like it is glowing bright pink. Kureha cheerfully notes how lucky she is to see such a rare side of him, while Takashi silently panics and wonders if she actually realized how hard he was struggling to hold himself back at the shrine. She sweetly adds that she was just genuinely happy to learn more about his interests, happily concluding that it means they both get to be happy. As they settle down to enjoy a delicious meal together, Kureha admits that she is feeling incredibly happy right now. Takashi firmly agrees with her sweet sentiment, boldly declaring that her absolute happiness is exactly why he cannot afford to just let things slide with her father. Kureha flashes a breathtakingly bright smile and softly agrees with him, passionately admitting that she desperately wants their current happiness to last forever. Taking in the gorgeous scenery after finishing their lunch, Kureha cheerfully groans that she ate a little too much and is suddenly feeling very sleepy. Takashi quickly agrees with her, weakly admitting that ordering the extra-large portion might have been a bit too greedy on his part. Kureha smoothly suggests taking a quick nap since the surrounding view is absolutely perfect. Catching Takashi completely off guard, she playfully offers to let him use her lap as a pillow, boldly declaring that it is her special way of making up for not giving him a kiss earlier. Remembering her father's strict warning to keep things wholesome, a heavily sweating Takashi nervously convinces himself that just resting his head on her lap should be perfectly fine before eagerly accepting the offer. Smiling warmly, Kureha happily pats her lap and invites him to come lie down. Timidly excusing himself, Takashi finally rests his head on his senior's lap as Kureha sweetly welcomes him. She gently strokes his head, leaving a heavily blushing Takashi completely speechless from the intimate contact. Feeling her incredible softness right against his head, Takashi lets out a quiet gasp, finding himself completely overwhelmed by the intense sensation. A highly flustered Takashi nervously points out that they are dangerously close right now. When Kureha playfully asks if he actually hates being this close, Takashi weakly stammers out a denial, prompting her to mischievously lean in even further. As she cheerfully declares she will get even closer, Takashi completely panics and frantically begs her to stop, crying out that his mind is already totally overloaded. Staring up at her with a deeply flushed face and utterly overwhelmed, Takashi softly admits that the sweet scent of her perfume is completely destroying his focus. Takashi is internally panicking, noting that Kureha smells completely different from usual and that the change is throwing him off. Sensing his reaction, Kureha explains she used her special perfume since they are on a trip, asking if he dislikes it or if it is simply not his type, which Takashi nervously denies. Takashi completely folds and confesses that the different scent makes him worry he won't be able to control his own desires. Kureha is absolutely delighted by his bluntness, teasingly noting that his honest reaction is just so like him. As they enjoy a quiet lap pillow under the shade of a tree, Kureha happily notes that she is genuinely pleased he noticed her change in perfume. Takashi can only offer a quiet, sheepish agreement as they the sweet, quiet moment. Just as they are enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, Kureha suddenly asks if he is truly satisfied with just a simple lap pillow, completely catching Takashi off guard. With a highly suggestive and affectionate smile, she softly whispers that it is completely fine for him to go ahead and do all the things he secretly wants to do. Takashi can only blink in utter confusion, desperately wondering what exactly she is referring to. But before he can even ask, his train of thought is instantly cut off as she suddenly pulls him close to her chest with a quiet thud. Takashi desperately tries to find his voice in his heavily muffled, red-faced state, weakly calling out to his senior, while she simply responds with a highly amused hum. When Takashi frantically asks what on earth is happening, as she leans over, Kureha sweetly giggles and explains that she is simply using her chest to soothe and heal his tired eyes. Kureha cheekily brings up his secret adult stash, pointing out that she knows he likes this exact scenario because she saw it inside his hidden books. Takashi can only freeze in absolute mortification, desperately praying that she didn't memorize every single other detail from his collection. Takashi weakly mumbles his embarrassment while a highly amused Kureha simply teases him back, playing completely innocent and leaving his frantic worries entirely unanswered. Takashi is completely overwhelmed with embarrassment when Momoji playfully presses him to his thoughts on their current cozy setup. Despite her teasingly admitting that even she feels a bit embarrassed by the situation, Takashi remains absolutely convinced that she is just doing this to get a reaction out of him. While Takashi internally rejoices at the sheer bliss of being comforted by his beloved senior, Momoji immediately sees right through him. She playfully teases him, asking if he is actually just enjoying the extremely close contact of her chest, acting as a makeshift eye mask. Unable to hide his true feelings any longer, Takashi enthusiastically confesses that he definitely loves the closeness, but only because it belongs to his beloved senior. Momoji can't help but giggle, admitting that his warm breath is tickling her chest, which only makes Takashi protest that he is being completely serious. Giving him a gentle pat, she warmly notes just how much he truly loves her, leaving him totally flustered and speechless. Takashi desperately begs her to stop teasing him so suddenly, but Momoji finds his adorable reactions far too endearing to resist. She then softens the mood by tenderly confessing her love for him, promising to love him forever and ever. Staring up at her sweet smile, a completely defeated Takashi silently accepts that he truly stands absolutely no chance against her overwhelming affection. As her loving words echo in his mind, Takashi silently vows to make this happiness last, resolving to work hard and become a man who is truly worthy of his senior. He quietly hopes that as they build their life together, she will eventually feel comfortable enough to lean on him just as much as he relies on her. The comfortable warmth soon lulls Takashi right to sleep, prompting a gentle Momoji to wonder if he ended up overexerting himself by being so considerate of her feelings. Looking down at his sleeping face, Momoji quietly reflects on how he likely already noticed she was simply running away from her father. She warmly appreciates how, despite her making him hold back so much, he never complains and always goes along with her selfishness without a second thought. Momoji finds herself completely defenseless against Takashi's charms, as she watches him sleep peacefully with his head resting in her lap, admitting to herself that she stands absolutely no chance against him. Her heart instantly skips a beat when Takashi starts softly whimpering and muttering her name in his sleep, completely catching her off guard. She is absolutely thrilled to realize that he is dreaming about her and calling her name even while unconscious, which makes her feel incredibly happy and loved. Unable to resist the sheer cuteness of the moment, she quietly snuggles in closer and whips out her phone, snapping multiple photos of her sleeping boyfriend to preserve the precious memory. Giggling happily over how adorable Takashi is, she looks at the photo of his sleeping face on her phone screen, though she quickly reminds herself that she shouldn't just keep relying on his sweet nature forever. She resolves to eventually sort out her complicated feelings and face her father properly so Takashi does not have to worry, but until that moment comes, she decides to cherish and lean on his warmth for just a little bit longer. The scene shifts to their cozy ryokan room in Izu, showcasing a peaceful traditional terrace area that is absolutely perfect for a relaxing getaway. The luxurious accommodations also feature a beautiful private open-air hot spring bath, setting the ultimate stage for their highly anticipated romantic retreat. The sudden getaway officially begins as they arrive at their gorgeous hot spring ryokan, warmly welcomed by the staff, who tells them to enjoy their private stay. Takashi is thoroughly impressed by how incredibly beautiful the inn is, though he admits it feels a little strange that they seem to be the only guests staying in such a massive place. Kureha casually suggests that it might simply be because they are traveling during the off-season. With a highly suggestive look, Kureha playfully asks if they should try out a mixed bath together, since they traveled all the way to a hot spring ryokan, teasingly noting that even the indoor bath looks quite spacious. The mere mention of a mixed bath sends Takashi's heart into complete overdrive, as his mind immediately conjures up another highly flustered fantasy of her leaving him to struggle for air. Takashi vigorously shakes his head to snap himself out of the temptation, strictly telling himself to calm down, because crossing any intimate lines when her father has not even accepted him yet would be completely irresponsible. Takashi nervously stammers, trying to suggest they visit the separate public baths before dinner instead, but Kureha suddenly closes the distance and directly calls him out for staring at her ever since they arrived. With a knowing look, she playfully asks if his eyes were focused on her neck. She takes her teasing to a whole new level by drawing his eyes to her midriff, playfully questioning if that was actually the spot he was staring at. Takashi is left completely frozen in absolute shock, his face burning bright red as the sheer scale of her temptation pushes his sanity entirely to its limit. Looking back at him with an incredibly sweet, heavily blushing smile, Kureha seductively whispers that she is actually always ready whenever he is. Takashi's self-control completely snaps as he yields to his desires, initiating a sudden passionate advance that leaves Kureha gasping in utter surprise. Completely overwhelmed by her relentless teasing, Takashi desperately repeats her name, his heart pounding in sheer panic as he struggles to process his own incredibly bold escalation. Kuraha softly reassures him that there is absolutely no need to sound so desperate, warmly promising him that she has no intention of running away from him. Blushing heavily, Takashi confesses that he is only calling out her name because he genuinely wants to, meekly asking if he is allowed to do so. Kuraha flusteredly explains that it is not that he isn't allowed to, but his uncharacteristic boldness simply took her by surprise before she weakly lets out a gasp as the tension spikes. Takashi's touch shifts lower, bringing her ticklish stomach into play and making her feel even more flustered. Takashi delivers a completely raw, breathtaking compliment, telling her how truly beautiful she is and causing her to melt with a soft sigh. Overwhelmed by the sheer intimacy of the moment, they both lose themselves in the rising heat, with Takashi softly calling out to his senior. Takashi softly whispers how adorable she is, completely breaking down her usual confident defenses. Fully surrendering to his desires, Takashi intensely begs her to let him hear more of her sweet, vulnerable sounds. As the romantic tension peaks, the atmosphere heats up and things start progressing quickly as Momoji silently asks for more. Momoji gasps out Takashi's name in the heat of the moment, begging for more, but the sudden intensity of their physical connection forces a red-faced Takashi to abruptly tell her to wait. Takashi completely freezes as the reality of his own actions sinks in, instantly panicking as he wonders what on earth he was doing. With a loud thud, he frantically scrambles backward and desperately apologizes to his senior, while a highly flustered Momoji weakly reassures him that it is fine, admitting that her own teasing joke simply went way too far. Momoji insists she is perfectly fine and tells him not to worry about it at all. However, a deeply guilt-ridden Takashi can't help but worry, convinced that his sudden aggressive advance must have genuinely terrified her. Trying to smoothly ease the heavy tension, Momoji cheerfully suggests they head down to the baths, playfully noting that they should save the mixed bath for another time. Takashi watches her go, deeply touched by how incredibly kind and understanding his senior is being despite the awkward moment. As he walks down the corridor, Takashi silently beats himself up, feeling completely spoiled by her endless patience and kindness. He begins to anxiously question what she could possibly even see in him when he keeps making such messy blunders. Stepping out of the refreshing hot spring, Takashi notes how good the bath felt, which finally allows him to clear his head. Looking back on her overwhelmed expression from earlier, the realization of how incredibly selfish he was being hits him like a physical blow. Worried that she will eventually grow to detest him if he keeps letting his impulses get the better of him, Takashi decides he needs to properly apologize for scaring her the moment she exits her bath. Looking around the quiet lobby, he notices that she has not come out yet. Spotting a vending machine, Takashi happily notes that nothing beats a cold bottle of milk after a long soak in the hot springs. He carefully scans the options, wondering which flavor his senior would prefer. Deciding to just buy one of every single flavor so she can choose her favorite, Takashi heads over to the relaxation area, noting that they even have massage chairs. He decides to wait for her there, immediately melting into pure bliss as the chair begins to vibrate. A deeply flustered Takashi wonders if Kuraha is already finished with her bath, only to suddenly hear a familiar voice calling out to him from nearby. Kuraha suddenly appears and playfully snaps him out of his daze, teasingly letting him know that his massage session has officially come to an end. Takashi is completely speechless as Kuraha warmly asks how long he has been waiting there, playfully teasing him about how warm she still is after just getting out of the bath. Kuraha immediately spots the 3 different kinds of milk on the table and playfully asks why he bought so many and why he is just waiting around, prompting a highly flustered Takashi to stammer that he was actually waiting to apologize. Looking incredibly embarrassed, Takashi confesses that he wanted to apologize because he worried that he had genuinely terrified her by pushing her down so forcefully. A surprised Kuraha can only stare back in utter bewilderment before gently comforting him, while Takashi can't help but groan at how seriously he let himself overthink the whole situation. With a deeply affectionate smile, Kuraha softly notes that his skin has gotten incredibly cold from waiting out in the lobby for so long. Kuraha continues to tease him, playfully asking if he really sat out there freezing the entire time just to wait for her, leaving a highly embarrassed Takashi struggling to find a proper excuse. Amused by his reaction, Kiriha sweetly apologizes for teasing him and warmly confesses that she actually wanted him to drink whichever flavor of milk he liked best. Offering a warm thank you, Kiriha happily tells him that he is going to catch a cold again, leaving Takashi completely dazed by how effortlessly his senior can act like nothing ever happened. Takashi's relaxing wait is suddenly interrupted when Kiriha unexpectedly approaches him with a surprise offer to give him a massage. Before a startled Takashi can even process the sudden proposal, she eagerly guides him back to their private room to get started. Back in their room, Kiriha begins the massage, immediately commenting on how surprisingly solid Takashi's body feels. While Takashi is left silently questioning what she means by her suggestive phrasing, he finds himself completely overwhelmed by the incredibly stimulating physical contact. The intimate atmosphere intensifies when Kiriha leans in close, softly confessing that just remembering holding his arm against her chest is enough to make her heart race. Her incredibly blunt admission leaves a heavily blushing Takashi utterly stunned and speechless. Kiriha giggles as she notes that she can easily tell how flustered he is getting even from behind. Completely pushed to his limit, Takashi frantically begs her to stop teasing him, warning her that he might lose control and end up pushing her down again if she continues to play with his feelings. Kiriha softly apologizes but maintains that she is being completely sincere about her feelings. She explains that, while he is usually so quiet and gentle, seeing his surprisingly forceful side and feeling the strength of his hands during their earlier encounter has left a deeply lasting impression on her. Kiriha adds to the tension by teasingly admitting that she now fully realizes he is a man, which only makes her own heart race. A highly flustered Takashi can only blush and weakly complain about his senior bringing up his earlier outburst yet again. Giggling softly, Kiriha reassures him that she just wants him to relax, offering to stop the massage if he really wishes. However, her tone quickly shifts as she playfully asks if he is ready to receive her serious massage, all the way to the very end, confessing that she simply cannot hold back any longer. The massage session officially resumes with Kiriha applying a bit of pressure, letting out soft gasps as she works. Takashi does his absolute best to stay grounded as the physical contact immediately starts sending the tension in the room right back through the roof. As the session continues, the physical strain and quiet intimacy of the room take an undeniable toll on both of them. The rising heat and heavy breathing make it increasingly difficult for either of them to maintain their composure. Applying more pressure, Kiriha points out how incredibly tense his muscles still are. While Takashi desperately tries to rationalize the situation to himself, by repeating that she is only massaging his back, he silently admits that his racing heart is completely refusing to listen to reason. Back in their private room, Kiriha playfully asks Takashi if something is wrong and mischievously wonders if her presence is making him feel overwhelmed. A highly flustered Takashi frantically mumbles a denial, which only prompts his senior to giggle with immense satisfaction. As she edges even closer to him, she teasingly demands to know why exactly he is shaking so much, causing a heavily panicked Takashi to desperately yell out in a frantic attempt to maintain some distance. Takashi desperately protests that they are going to have a massive problem if she keeps pushing her luck, but a highly amused Kiriha only giggles and teases him back by asking what exactly could possibly be a problem. Hoping to regain control, Takashi turns away and claims he can tell she is smiling without even looking, but his sudden movement accidentally causes Kiriha to lose her balance and tumble backward in complete surprise. Kiriha sits up with a startled gasp to quickly check herself, leaving Takashi staring back in complete stunned silence as the sudden mishap hangs heavily in the air. An incredibly awkward, heavy silence fills the room as both of them blush, furiously, completely unable to process the highly embarrassing and accidental exposure. Desperate to save himself, Takashi tries to awkwardly laugh it off and change the subject to their upcoming dinner, but Kiriha immediately sees right through him and playfully calls out his highly desperate attempt to dodge the topic. Kiriha gushes over how incredibly cute he is when he is flustered and enthusiastically offers to take a picture of him. However, Takashi realizes that his current attire makes his embarrassment far too obvious to hide, causing him to freeze in absolute panic and frantically beg her to stop. Takashi's jaw completely drops when Kiriha casually reveals her phone screen, exposing the fact that she has been using an old photo of him as her lock screen wallpaper. While Takashi frantically protests that he would never snoop through her phone without permission anyway, Kuraha sweetly notes that she is completely fine with him checking her device whenever he pleases. Takashi immediately lectures her about respecting basic privacy and warns her not to say such things lightly since it isn't a joke, but Kuraha looks back with complete sincerity and softly declares that she is not joking at all. Takashi shyly insists that he won't be checking her phone or invading her privacy, even if she says it is completely fine, firmly believing that they need to show each other proper respect. Amused by his sweet sincerity, Momoji softly giggles and teasingly notes how incredibly serious he is, warmly admitting that she absolutely loves that side of him. Their quiet moment is suddenly interrupted by a knock on the door as the Ryakan staff politely asks if they can bring in their dinner, prompting a cheerful response from Momoji. With their conversation temporarily put on hold, they both readily agree to sit down and enjoy their meal. While waiting, Momoji quietly wonders if she was playing a bit too close to the fire earlier by trying to help him relax, reflecting back to the intense moment when Takashi unexpectedly pushed her down. She secretly confesses to herself that his sudden aggressive passion actually made her incredibly happy, even if she knows they still need to be careful. Reminding herself that they are still just students who need to keep their boundaries intact, she mentally apologizes to Takashi, before quickly distracting herself with a cheerful thought about enjoying some coffee milk to help them keep their composure. Their anticipation turns into pure awe as a spectacular, beautifully arranged traditional kaiseki feast is laid out right in front of them. An incredibly thrilled Momoji happily gushes over how mouth-watering everything looks and eagerly looks forward to the meal, even while weakly wondering if such a luxurious spread is a bit too extravagant for mere students. Takashi glances over at his senior, quickly figuring out that what she has really been looking forward to the entire time is trying Izu's famous local sake. Takashi reflects on the incredibly stern look she gave her father Kotaro just yesterday, marveling at how easily she bounces back to her cheerful self at the mere mention of delicious alcohol. He is incredibly relieved to see that with just a little bit of alcohol, she is already completely back to the warm, smiling senior he knows and loves. As he quietly hopes that she is truly able to unwind and relax on this sudden getaway, she suddenly calls out his name. With a highly playful and slightly mischievous look, she cutely asks if he would like to have a drink with her. Takashi enthusiastically agrees that he would absolutely love some, prompting a highly pleased response from his senior as she happily praises his great attitude. She carefully pours the warm beverage for him, keeping the cozy and intimate atmosphere incredibly high. Takashi is instantly amazed by the steaming aroma of sweet rice and rich sake, realizing this is his very first time trying anything like it, and noting how well his senior already appreciates its wonderful taste. Taking a sip, Takashi silently resolves that he wants to learn to appreciate these things too, so he can finally become a mature man worthy of her, but his quiet determination is cut short when she suddenly speaks up. Just as she starts to warn him that he absolutely shouldn't down it like regular alcohol, because it is hot sake, Takashi has already chugged the entire cup, leaving him to choke on the sudden heat. While Takashi complains about feeling completely drained of all his strength after drinking too fast, Kuraha teasingly notes that she was just about to warn him to slow down. When Takashi comments on how completely wobbly she seems to be acting, Kuraha immediately fires back that he is actually the wobbly one, playfully adding that she has spent the entire trip restraining herself only for him to go and get drunk first, leaving a highly doubtful Takashi to wonder if she was ever really holding back at all. Kuraha firmly confirms that she was indeed holding back her true feelings the entire day, prompting a sheepish Takashi to quickly apologize for getting so carried away and drinking too much, though she warmly reassures him that she deeply loves that exact part of his personality too. Kuraha softly confesses how much she absolutely adores teasing him and seeing him blush in response, gently adding that she also deeply loves how he constantly worries about her, which leaves a deeply moved Takashi completely speechless. Pouring her heart out completely, Kuraha tenderly declares that she loves everything about him, and straightforwardly confesses her deep love, leaving Takashi completely frozen as she softly explains that this is the exact reason for what she is about to do next. Looking up with an incredibly sweet and deeply affectionate blush, Kuraha directly and boldly asks him to a kiss with her. Finally, casting all of their hesitations aside, the two of them eagerly lean in and a deeply passionate, tender kiss together. As their lips gently part, Takashi breathlessly murmurs about how incredibly warm the kiss felt, and softly notes that he can still taste the sake on her breath, prompting a quiet sigh from his senior. With a beautifully warm and completely content smile, Kureha affectionately calls out his name, entirely happy to be closer to him than ever before. Staring deeply into her eyes with absolute adoration, Takashi softly calls out to his senior as his heart completely overflows with emotion. In a wave of raw, unfiltered emotion, he passionately confesses his love over and over, firmly declaring that he never wants them to be apart and desperately wishes to stay right by her side forever. Kureha sweetly admits that she feels the exact same way about him. Holding her close, a deeply moved, Takashi silently resolves that if his senior truly wanted him to take the next step, he would absolutely follow through without any hesitation. The romantic tension finally reaches its absolute peak in the quiet room as the two of them an incredibly tender and passionate kiss. The passionate mood abruptly shatters and freezes them both in place when Kureha suddenly remembers their dinner, happily pointing out that they should start eating before the delicious food gets completely cold. A highly embarrassed Takashi frantically agrees, apologizing for letting himself get so completely carried away, while Kureha simply giggles at his reaction. Takashi silently reflects on how incredibly clingy he gets whenever he is around her, admitting to himself that he desperately wants to spoil her back just as much as she spoils him. Eager to make the most of their cozy dinner together, a smiling Kureha happily offers to feed him herself, warmly asking him to open up. Though still feeling incredibly flustered by her continuous affection, Takashi completely yields to her sweetness and softly agrees to let her pamper him. Kureha playfully warns him to prepare himself because she is going to feed him plenty, prompting Takashi to tease her back about whether he should get his hopes up. Underneath his playful banter, Takashi silently reaffirms his deep desire to eventually spoil his senior just as much as she does for him. As the night winds down, Takashi looks over at Kureha and silently vows to take all of her worries away, wishing more than anything to support her through whatever she is facing. Staring at her with endless affection, as she starts to drift off, Takashi's deep resolution to protect their happiness only grows stronger. He quietly completes his silent vow, promising to always remain right by her side as they peacefully fall asleep together after their long and eventful day. In the middle of the quiet Ryokan room, a phone suddenly starts ringing loudly, breaking the peaceful silence. Takashi groggily stirs in his sleep, mumbling in confusion as his phone continues to violently vibrate and ring right next to him. Letting out an exhausted groan, Takashi sits up to check his screen, waking up Kureha, who sleepily turns over and asks him what on earth is wrong. Takashi realizes it is a call from Yu, prompting Kureha to sleepily mumble at him to just go answer it already. Excusing himself, Takashi quietly steps out of the room and answers the call, only to be instantly blasted by a highly aggressive Yu demanding to know exactly where he is and what he is doing. Yu bluntly lectures him that they actually have university classes today, asking if he completely let his guard down just because of the recent holidays. When she notes he can still make it if he hurries, Takashi sheepishly admits he is actually in Izu right now, desperately begging her to cover his roll call and leaving her completely speechless. Takashi desperately apologizes and promises to make it up to her next time, but Yu quickly sighs and correctly guesses that if he is actually skipping class to be in Izu, it must have everything to do with his senior forcing him into a quiet, defeated confirmation. Letting out a heavy sigh, Yu eventually relents and agrees to cover for him just for today. However, she casually adds that she was fully convinced he was only skipping class because he was busy getting intimate with his senior, making a highly nervous Takashi loudly gulp in embarrassment. Yu bluntly tells him to just go and get his relationship business sorted out already. And when Takashi gratefully thanks her, she defensively retorts that she definitely isn't doing this as a favor for him. Hanging up the call with a final beep, Yu leaves him with a parting message, hoping he will return the favor next time, leaving a thoughtful Takashi to quietly stare down at his phone. Kureha suddenly appears right behind him to ask if he has finished talking, startling Takashi as she suspiciously questions if he did something weird to Yu. Takashi frantically defends himself, explaining that Yu was only mad because they actually have class today. Kureha apologizes for making him slack off, but Takashi quickly reassures her that he assumed it was a day off anyway, though he wonders if she doesn't need to head back since they traveled all the way to Izu. Giggling at his concern, Kiriha playfully asks him what he actually wants to do today in that case. Noting that they only traveled to Izu because of her own selfish whims, Kiriha warmly encourages Takashi to make a selfish request of his own, prompting him to eagerly accept the challenge. Blushing heavily, Takashi nervously begins his heartfelt request, admitting that, while he definitely doesn't want to rush her into anything, he passionately confesses that he simply wants to always stay right by his senior's side. His direct and earnest confession completely catches her off guard, leaving her to stare back in wide-eyed, blushing silence. She suddenly giggles and playfully clarifies that she actually only meant his casual sightseeing plans for the day, leaving a deeply embarrassed Takashi to frantically blush over his massive misunderstanding. But she quickly melts his embarrassment by sweetly admitting she feels the exact same way about wanting to stay by his side forever, warmly promising that she will work hard to become someone who can stand proudly right beside him. The morning after their incredibly emotional night, the couple kicks off their day with some local sightseeing where an excited Kiriha cheerfully points out a group of adorable capybaras soaking in a hot spring of their own. The sightseeing date continues with a visit to a capybara hot spring enclosure where Kiriha is instantly captivated by the adorable creatures. Takashi warmly agrees as they watch the animals soak up close, enjoying the peaceful and cute display together. Kiriha jokingly admits she wants to take one of the capybaras home, prompting a dry warning from Takashi, before she quickly laughs it off. Their amusement turns to sudden surprise when a playful capybara splashes water all over them, catching Kiriha completely off guard. Rather than being upset about getting drenched, Kiriha simply giggles at the sudden mishap, happily noting that the warm spring water actually feels quite pleasant. The playful atmosphere quickly turns into a major test of self-control for Takashi, as he realizes his senior's wet shirt has become completely translucent, leaving him to silently panic as her underwear becomes clearly visible through the soaked fabric. Desperate to protect her modesty and keep her warm, Takashi quickly drapes his jacket over Kiriha's shoulders, admitting that he simply does not want anyone else to see her like that. Deeply touched by his sweet consideration, Kiriha happily accepts the jacket and playfully asks if it looks good on her, prompting a deeply flustered Takashi to assure her that it suits her very well. Just as they start walking, Kiriha suddenly speaks up, catching Takashi's attention and prompting him to curiously ask what is on her mind. Kiriha mischievously asks him what color her underwear was, completely flustering Takashi and sending him into an immediate panic. After laughing off his embarrassed reaction, she happily suggests they move on to explore the rest of the area. Seeing her in such high spirits makes Takashi realize that although he had to skip his college classes for this sudden getaway, he is incredibly glad he brought his senior here to help her unwind. Takashi silently decides that he owes a big thank you to Yu for helping him arrange such a wonderful getaway. With his mind at ease, he continues strolling happily alongside Kiriha as they make their way to the next sightseeing spot. The couple steps inside a beautiful greenhouse filled with exotic plants and giant cacti. While studying an informational plaque together, Kiriha suddenly points out that a plant is eating, leaving a highly surprised Takashi to take a closer look. While riding the train toward their next destination, Kiriha cheerfully suggests visiting a museum next. Sensing a quiet moment between them, Takashi decides to gently speak up and ask his senior a question. When Kiriha curiously asks what is on his mind, Takashi hesitantly voices his worry that she does not seem to be fully taking everything in or enjoying herself. He asks if there is something bothering her, admitting he might be overthinking, but simply wanting to make sure she is okay. Takashi quickly reassures her that it is perfectly fine if nothing is wrong, but explains that if she is carrying a heavy burden, he genuinely wants to be there to support and help her. Kiriha lets out a soft laugh, warmly admitting that she obviously stands absolutely no chance of hiding her true feelings from him. Opening up completely, Kiriha honestly reveals that all the scenic places they visited today are actually spots she used to visit with her family when she was a little girl. She confesses that these precious childhood memories are the real reason she wanted to come to Izu, though she playfully adds that it was also a convenient distance for their trip. Takashi realizes that the location holds a deeply memorable significance for his senior. Kiriha fondly recalls that those early trips are precious memories from back when her father was still incredibly kind, leaving a surprised Takashi to silently reflect on the older man's past behavior. While Kureha admits she originally planned to spend even more time exploring their surroundings, Takashi silently observes her quiet anxiety over her strained relationship with her father. He is deeply touched to see her returning to a place of family memories, earnestly trying to understand her father in her own way. As they step off the bus, Kureha confesses her frustration over not understanding why her father grew so emotionally distant from her, especially since she wants to resolve their conflict quickly. When Takashi gently suggests that her father might simply be deeply worried about her, Kureha firmly replies that she is no longer a child before quickly offering a warm thank you to soften her tone. Kureha sighs and asks if it seems pathetic that she traveled all the way to Izu just to spite her father. Takashi warmly smiles and questions her doubt, pointing out that she has actually been thinking about her father the entire time, and declaring that this incredibly caring nature is exactly what makes his senior so wonderful. Completely caught off guard by his sweet reassurance, a heavily blushing Kureha can only offer a quiet, happy hum of agreement as his comforting words lift her spirits. Takashi resolves that while a serious look certainly suits his senior, a bright smile suits her best, silently vowing to do everything he can to keep her smiling as much as possible. While sitting down together, Kureha admits that is exactly why she wanted to come to Izu with him, before asking if he figured out anything about her father Kotaro at the museum, prompting Takashi to sheepishly confess he got absolutely nothing as she apologizes for dragging him along. Takashi quickly reassures her not to worry, pointing out that they never had a proper relaxing date prior to moving in together due to their curfews, so he is genuinely enjoying himself. A pleased Kureha tells him to just focus on what he needs to do, but suddenly gazes at him and notes that he is acting a bit different today. She happily giggles and directly confesses that he is actually acting pretty cool today, completely catching a highly flustered Takashi off guard. Takashi desperately stammers that flattery won't get her anywhere, but his heart races when he realizes she is being completely serious. When she suggestively leans in and asks if a little daytime fun is allowed, a heavily sweating Takashi frantically reminds her that it is still the middle of the day. Completely ignoring his protests, Kureha cheerfully calls the server over and orders a draft beer and a citrus sparkling drink, which quickly arrive with a loud thud. Takashi weakly sighs that his energy feels completely drained, but Kureha playfully points out that he seemed pretty into her teasing anyway, forcing him to blushingly admit that playing along with her pace is simply too much fun. The two of them eagerly dive into their cold drinks, happily gulping down their beverages with a highly satisfied sigh of relief. And incredibly happy, Kureha lets out a cheerful squeal over how sour and refreshing her citrus sparkling drink is, her mood instantly soaring to a whole new level. Guzzling down her beer, Kureha contentedly sighs that drinking beer in the afternoon is absolutely the best, before she suddenly turns her focus back to her boyfriend to bring up their next topic. As they sit together having a drink, Kureha teasingly asks Takashi if he is sitting a little too close to her. Takashi quickly denies it, claiming it is just her imagination, though his senior remains highly skeptical of his excuse. Leaning in with a knowing smile, Kureha playfully points out that he has certainly gotten a lot bolder since they arrived in Izu. After asking if she truly thinks so, Takashi suddenly pauses and realizes that she might actually be right. His mind immediately flashes back to their highly intense, awkward moment from earlier, causing both of them to blush furiously in remembrance. While Takashi gloomily admits that he was simply beating himself up a bit earlier, Kureha firmly tells him that it is not healthy to think that way. She sighs and points out that both of them have actually been acting a little bit off ever since they arrived in Izu. Takashi gently replies that he didn't actually notice anything unusual about her asking if something is truly bothering her. Kureha simply chuckles and teasingly asks if he is seriously asking her such a question. Before Takashi can even answer, Kureha silently slides closer, catching him completely off guard. Looking at him with a deeply affectionate expression, Kureha boldly confesses that even more than usual she can't help but want to taste him. This highly shocking and suggestive remark leaves a heavily blushing Takashi utterly panicked. Giggling at his expectedly panicked reaction, Kureha warmly thanks him for always reacting exactly how she hopes. However, her tone softens as she admits that although she is acting like everything is perfectly normal, she is actually struggling to control her intense emotions and simply didn't want to become a burden to him. Hearing her speak of herself as a burden, Takashi immediately protests, earnestly declaring that there is absolutely no way he would ever view her that way, though a thoughtful Kureha quietly wonders if that is truly the case. Takashi firmly reassures her that he is completely serious, passionately declaring that whether she is her usual cheerful self or the version of her with a lot on her mind, he deeply loves every single side of Kureha. His heartfelt, honest speech touches her deeply, prompting a warm chuckle as she notes that his response is just so like him. Kureha looks at Takashi with a soft, warm blush and sincerely thanks him for always being so incredibly sweet and considerate. Returning his gaze with a deeply affectionate smile, she softly confesses that she loves him too. Their romantic moment is suddenly cut short as the server arrives with their food, sending a highly embarrassed Takashi into a full panic as he realizes they almost made a massive scene in public. Takashi lets out a sigh of relief, admitting that he completely forgot they were in a public dining area, while Kureha giggles and teases that they can finish their intimacy later. Looking down at their meal, Kureha notes that Takashi is remarkably different from other guys, because his ability to properly hide his true desires is incredibly impressive, leaving a confused Takashi to wonder what she means by true feelings. Takashi's heart thumps nervously as Kureha explains that most college-aged guys make absolutely no effort to hide their raw desires, constantly making creepy, obvious comments about her body, which she finds incredibly off-putting even if she understands they are at that curious age. Kureha looks at Takashi, warmly noting that even though he definitely has those same physical desires, he still makes a genuine effort to see and appreciate her for who she actually is as a person. She softly adds that while she knows he sometimes views her physically, his ultimate respect for her always shines through. Takashi nervously apologizes for using the word desire, though Kureha shrugs it off, admitting that most girls can easily pick up on those feelings anyway. She looks at him with complete sincerity, confessing that she desperately wants to know if his feelings for her are rooted in simple physical attraction or if they represent something much deeper. Kureha locks her gaze onto Takashi, her eyes reflecting her deep and serious hope for his honest answer. Kureha suddenly reacts in sudden realization, muttering to herself that she finally understands everything, leaving a highly confused Takashi to call out her name. Kureha confidently declares that she has finally figured out the real reason why her father suddenly started acting so cold and distant toward her. Her sudden dramatic revelation completely catches Takashi off guard, sending his mind into another spiral of utter confusion. As their bus pulls away, Takashi asks his senior if she is absolutely sure she doesn't want to see anything else, but she calmly confirms that it is about time they head back. Takashi silently reflects on the end of their spontaneous Izu getaway, feeling a little sad that it is over, but reminding himself that their main goal was to help his senior find the strength to face her father, Kotaro. Even though he doubts he was actually all that helpful, Takashi decides that as long as his senior managed to sort things out, the trip was a success, and he casually suggests checking out of the Ryokan, only to receive a highly nervous gulp from her. Noticing her sudden hesitation, Takashi asks if something is wrong, prompting a deeply sweating Kureha to awkwardly stammer about their plans. Flashing a heavily sweating, guilty grin, Kureha suddenly suggests extending their trip and heading back tomorrow morning instead of today. Takashi nervously asks what exactly she means by that, leaving a blushing Kureha to awkwardly laugh off her sudden boldness. Kureha blushingly confesses she thought it would be nice to try a mixed bath together, before heading home, casually dropping the bombshell that she already went ahead and extended their stay, leaving Takashi completely frozen in sheer shock. When Kureha asks him what he thinks of the idea, a highly flustered Takashi desperately asks if she truly realizes the sheer scale of what she is proposing. While Takashi silently worries that doing such a thing would push his self-control past its absolute limit, Kureha confidently states that she actually completely understands his concerns. Staring down with a heavily blushing, sweating face, Kureha softly admits that since she already knows exactly how incredibly serious and earnest her boyfriend is, she fully anticipated he would react this way. Kureha confesses her true desires, admitting she still wants to a mixed bath with Takashi in a completely private spot where they can flirt without any interruptions. Takashi is completely overwhelmed, silently lamenting his own failing willpower as he realizes all of his efforts to restrain himself are utterly falling apart. Takashi tries to set some firm boundaries, nervously pleading with Kureha to actually stop whenever he genuinely tells her to, even as he secretly admits to himself that he was thoroughly enjoying their close moments anyway. While Kureha only offers a playful promise to try her best to panic, Takashi begs her to say it with real confidence, leaving his senior looking forward to enjoying their trip to Izu for a little while longer. Taking matters into her own hands, Kureha approaches the front desk to reserve their private bath, and she is pleased to hear from the receptionist that it is fully available for them to use at any point during the evening. Kureha immediately books a 2-hour slot, starting right away, breathing a quiet sigh of relief as the staff member politely tells them to wait comfortably in their room while everything is prepared. As she heads back, Kureha finds herself overwhelmed at the mere thought of finally sharing an intimate mixed bath with her beloved Takashi. Kureha quietly reflects on how Takashi is always protecting her and constantly suppressing his natural instincts for her sake. Deep down, she realizes she had already convinced herself that a sweet guy like Takashi could never be like other men. This sudden realization makes her think of her father, leading her to wonder if he has been acting the exact same way for her own protection. She admits to herself that she never would have understood her father's true feelings if it weren't for Takashi, leaving her deeply grateful and determined to do absolutely everything she can to repay her sweet boyfriend. They eventually make their way over to the gorgeous, secluded outdoor hot spring to finally enjoy their highly anticipated mixed bath together. Taking a deep breath, they finally take their very first steps into the secluded private bath area to begin their long-awaited evening. Spotting his obvious hesitation, Kureha playfully asks Takashi if he is having any second thoughts about their plan, though a highly flustered Takashi quickly assures her that he is definitely still on board. Takashi confesses that he is actually happier than ever that they decided to travel to Izu, and still cannot believe his luck in sharing a bath with his senior, prompting a deeply touched Kureha to warmly echo his sentiments. Eager to get comfortable, Kureha cheerfully beckons Takashi to slide closer and warmly offers to wash his back for him. Takashi nervously agrees to her sweet proposal, but his racing heart beats completely out of control as he silently admits to himself that this level of sheer intimacy is unlike anything he has ever experienced before. Takashi is absolutely overwhelmed with excitement and nerves, desperately begging Kureha to go easy on him while struggling to hide the massive grin on his face. Desperate to maintain his composure and properly enjoy this rare bathing opportunity, Takashi is forced to look away and beg for a break because looking at his senior is simply way too stimulating. Takashi finally cracks and admits that he is dealing with a highly awkward, serious physical situation down below, prompting a blushing Kureha to instantly understand his predicament. To help him distract himself, Kureha playfully suggests that he should focus on his back instead of what is in front of him, sliding right up against him and leaving a startled Takashi in utter shock. Completely taking charge, Kureha playfully presses against him and demands his full attention, leaving a highly flustered Takashi utterly powerless as he desperately begs her to wait. Kureha softly explains that if she doesn't stay close, he will just keep worrying about what is happening in front, adding that she genuinely wants him to pay far more attention to her, as Takashi struggles to cope with the incredible sensation. The stakes rise even higher when a highly panicked Takashi nervously speaks up, suddenly realizing to his absolute shock that his senior is not wearing a towel at all, which she happily and casually confirms. Takashi frantically reminds her that she was supposed to help him maintain his self-control, desperately admitting that he is genuinely worried about losing his grip. But a highly amused Kureha simply smiles and insists that she just wants to flirt with him with everything she has got. Staring at his senior, Takashi marvels at her sudden and intense boldness, quietly figuring out that now that she has finally resolved the mysteries surrounding her father, all of the deep emotions she had been suppressing have finally come bursting out. Deciding to finally match her fiery passion, Takashi unexpectedly steals his resolve and boldly declares that they should go all out, leaving a highly surprised Kureha completely stunned as he vows to give this flirting game absolutely everything he has got too. Takashi is fully determined to match his senior's fiery passion, declaring that he wants her to be completely free to do whatever she desires after holding back her feelings for so long, which she finds incredibly fun. Kureha is absolutely thrilled to pamper him, washing his back and eagerly asking how it feels, forcing a highly flustered Takashi To admit, it feels amazing even as the intense closeness gets him worked up far more than usual. While Kureha is happy he is enjoying her pampering, Takashi desperately tries to keep his composure, silently thanking the lack of a reflection in front of him, because seeing her clearly right now would completely break his self-control, though a sudden slip quickly disrupts his thoughts. The peaceful romantic atmosphere instantly shatters with a sudden crash when his senior loses her footing, prompting a heavily panicked Takashi to yell out in shock and frantically make sure she is completely unharmed. A slightly embarrassed Kureha quickly reassures him that she is perfectly fine, apologetically explaining that she simply slipped on the wet floor and did not mean to give him such a massive scare. Kureha breathes a heavy sigh of relief, warmly thanking Takashi because grabbing onto him saved her from a painful fall. Takashi is genuinely relieved she is safe, but he suddenly starts stammering, struggling to voice a highly awkward realization. Takashi nervously points out that her desperate grab to break her fall ended up a little too close for comfort, sending his senior into an absolute state of sheer shock and utter embarrassment as she finally realizes what she is holding on to. Kureha instantly scrambles backward in a massive panic, frantically apologizing and desperately assuring him she would never do anything he dislikes. A heavily blushing Takashi quickly calms her down by insisting that since it was just an accident, it couldn't be helped, and he still has his self-control, leading a worried Kureha to ask if he really doesn't hate her. Takashi warmly reassures her that he could never hate her, admitting he actually likes her even more now, because despite her usual scatterbrained nature, she always knows when to be serious. He silently observes that despite all her bold talk of flirting, she is still trying incredibly hard to restrain herself for his sake. Deciding they should simply stay within what they can comfortably handle, Takashi confidently asks his senior if it is okay for him to try something new with her, prompting an immediate but highly curious agreement from Kureha. Kureha playfully expresses her surprise that Takashi even knew about mud packs, but he quickly clarifies that he only just learned about them after arriving at this hot spring. As Takashi starts rubbing the slimy mud onto her shoulder, Kureha lets out a sudden startled squeak, prompting a panicked Takashi to freeze and frantically ask if she is all right. Kureha reassures him that it merely tickled and tells him to continue, teasingly asking if he wanted to apply the mud to her that badly. When Takashi shyly admits that he did, she playfully calls him a pervert, before softly adding that he isn't the only one feeling that way, completely flustering him. Kureha boldly confesses that she had been thinking about all sorts of things she wanted to do if they ever got to a bath together, and a deeply moved Takashi softly agrees, realizing they the exact same desires. Standing at the edge of the water, Kureha nervously asks if they are really supposed to get in covered in mud and worries about getting in trouble, but Takashi explains that the entire point of this specific hot spring is to wash the mud off while soaking. With their worries cleared up, they slowly step down into the warm, inviting water. Settling into the soothing hot spring close to one another, they both let out a quiet sigh of relief as the tension of the day finally begins to melt away. Letting out a soft giggle, Kureha happily admits that while she originally wanted to touch him a lot, she is already completely satisfied just getting to snuggle up this close to him in the water. Takashi shyly replies that he feels the exact same way and is thrilled to know their feelings match. Kureha then mischievously notes that his touch earlier was a little naughty and directly asks if he liked how her skin felt, forcing a heavily blushing Takashi to stammer out an embarrassed confirmation. Kureha warmly agrees that she liked it too, but her tone suddenly shifts as she admits to having mixed feelings about the fact that their incredibly intimate moment is technically all thanks to her father, leaving Takashi completely taken aback. Relaxing in the warm bath, Kureha opens up about her lingering guilt, admitting she feels too terrible to just be happy now that she realizes her hatred for her father was based on a misunderstanding. Takashi gently reassures her, promising that if she tells him directly, her father will absolutely forgive her. Staring back in quiet, thoughtful silence, Kureha processes his comforting words as his genuine sweetness touches her heart. After quietly promising to think about his advice, Kureha quickly shifts the mood, playfully asking if he would like to have another drink later since she bought some delicious-looking alcohol at reception. While Takashi nervously questions if drinking right after a hot bath is safe, Kureha casually brushes it off by promising to only have a little, though Takashi reminds himself They still have unfinished business with her father, Kotaro. Although Takashi warns that it is way too early to completely let their guard down, Kureha suddenly pulls him close, softly admitting that she just wants to ignore all their worries for a little longer, so she can enjoy how happy she is. Looking at her warm, beautiful smile, Takashi finds himself completely defenseless, silently admitting that it is impossible to resist when the person you love says something so sweet. Yielding completely to her warmth, Takashi silently decides that it is perfectly fine for them to stay close like this for just a little while longer. While they both savor this peaceful moment, Takashi is left silently wondering how much longer his rapidly fading self-control can actually hold out.